Thank you for joining the Sharpest College Football Podcast's SEC Preview. I am BuckMetrics, joined as always by Robert Martin, a very special guest whom we will introduce in a moment. If this is your first time joining us, we very much appreciate it and welcome you. And if you are a returning listener or viewer, you are obviously, by definition, brilliant. And with that, I'm going to introduce today's guest. I go over here. His name is Graham Coffey. He is the publisher and co-founder of Dog Central. He is the host of the Power G Show. He is a 2011 graduate of the University of Georgia. And on Twitter, I call it Twitter, sorry, Graham. Hope that doesn't... At Graham Coffey, DC. If you want PDFs of this or any other conference previews, they're available. Just hit me up. Either just leave your email in the YouTube comments. I will give you access to the Google Drive with all the PDFs, or you can just hit me up on X/Twitter at BuckMetrics. This is, and especially if this is your first time, believe me, take a screenshot of this. We refer to this throughout the podcast. It's a glossary of the terms that we use in reference to metrics. Save it, refer to it throughout this podcast and any future episodes, because, like I said, we do refer to it a lot. Being that this is the SEC preview, I asked AI, as I am wont to do, to put a picture of Robert and us at a SEC tailgate. Now, I kind of, how AI treated my face here, kind of like I'm a very attractive movie star, put my dogs there, it wasn't so kind. I have no idea who this guy is. It's not Graham. Robert, AI was not kind to you. Somehow Georgia has a tailgate in Nashville. I don't know, Graham, is that how things work there?
Yeah, they take over Vanderbilt Stadium once every couple of years, so it's
True.
Not totally inaccurate.
Okay. So I asked for a redo, and it was a little more kind to Robert. I don't know what it did to me, but you know what? AI, I'm just telling you kids, if you are slow in creating very horrible graphics, AI is definitely coming for your job. It's got that down for sure. All right, SEC overview. Just looking at the conference as a whole, surprising. I think hit a lull here. No head coaching changes in the entire SEC. It's like the SEC didn't go SEC in the last offseason. There's a handful of proven quarterbacks. There's a lot of unprovens, a lot of question marks at some of the top contenders here. There is a lot of returning defensive experience, a lot of greens here. This is my returning talent metrics here. The run defense runs very deep. Only one team in the entire conference was not statistically significantly above average against the run in FBS. So if you can run the ball in this conference, you're doing something right. Robert, anything from an overview standpoint that strikes you about the SEC?
I will say that the no coaching change is fascinating and it's something to watch. At any point in time, with only maybe a couple of exceptions, any coach can be fired, basically, theoretically, right? You're basically only one or two bad seasons. The fact that no coach got fired means this is like a powder keg waiting to blow. That means that there's a lot of people on one or two more bad games being away from being fired. So, yeah, no coaching changes this season, but watch there be like 8 next season or something, right? That's the thing. And as we're going down this list, we're like, hey, this guy could be in hot water. This guy could be in hot water. So there's a lot of people who this is their proof, make it or break it year, and some will be able to make it, and some will not. And I think you're going to be coaching here next year.
Yeah. Graham, any kind of big picture storylines that you see in the SEC?
I think on the coaching front, definitely, I think the rev share, house settlement stuff influenced that, with just universities not being entirely sure how that was going to shake out and where they should spend their money, how much money they would have to spend over the next decade. With that picture crystallizing a little bit, I could see lots of movement in the coaching ranks in the conference this year. It's inevitable that some of these jobs have to change just because all these teams aren't going to have good seasons. And then I think big picture SEC, it's the first time in a long time where it feels like Georgia and Alabama have taken a back seat in terms of the storyline, right? And in terms of just the talking season churn. Like, we had Saban's dynasty, and then we had Georgia 21 through 23, 36-0 in the regular season. They win 2 national titles. And it's just been, those 2 teams are the only teams that have been voted as preseason SEC champions since, I think, 2010. And now we've got a new one with Texas, 15 years on. So it's definitely a shift, and I'm sure we'll get into the whole Texas thing, but it's a fascinating time to see if they can really crack into that club.
Yeah, that's a good point. I almost pass over the preseason polls, and it's just, I don't know, not to spoil the Texas thing. I'll just say it's going to be interesting to see Steve Sarkisian as a preseason number one. I know that he's not the same guy at USC, but some of the DNA has not changed. I'll just put it there, not to spoil the Texas preview. To your point, though, about Alabama, we're going to go alphabetically, so they are first today. Second season under Kalen DeBoer. Ryan Grubb is the new OC. He was the OC for DeBoer at Washington. The new starting quarterback is Ty Simpson. Jalen Milroe had a 162 Apex Plus, and if you're new, that's pretty freaking elite. That's almost about as good as it gets, especially for somebody that started over the whole season. Not to mention, obviously, what a talented athlete he is. I like the starting O-line and that it's experienced. We have no transfers in. One of the things that I see in the SEC that I haven't seen in other conferences, and I think this is where the elite programs are really going to start showing off, it's we don't have to bring in offensive linemen to start. We've got that down and we can retain it. And it just, my school, USC, we're at the other end of that. It's just more bodies, please. So I really didn't realize that until I did the SEC preview here. And I see it in a couple programs. So it doesn't surprise me with Kalen DeBoer is an elite coach in my mind. They're second in the SEC in 2025 Ryan. So what that means is for all of the explosive receiving yards that we had last year in all of college football, some kids go through the portal, they portal out, some graduate, some portal in. And what you're left with is this is a cumulative explosiveness effort in the passing game. And Alabama is starting from a really strong position, 6th in the FBS. They've got heavy returning experience. The season win total is 9.5. The over is -130. I really want to love this team. And I'm, again, sorry to do this, SEC folks, but I tend to make this about me and my USC experience. I look at what happened last year with Miller Moss in playing for Lincoln Riley. It just did not fit. And I thought about that because if you think about the quarterbacks that Kalen DeBoer has had, Jake Haener, not an awesome athlete, but very mobile and could really just scramble for yards. Michael Penix, obviously a great quarterback. And then the best of them all, from an athletic standpoint, clearly Jalen Milroe. I don't know about this Ty Simpson guy, so Graham, just help me out here since you're in the SEC footprint. Could Ty Simpson be Kalen's Miller Moss?
He could, for sure. Yeah, I think the fascinating storyline for Alabama's quarterback room is Ty Simpson just the high floor option for now. And will we see any of Keelan Russell, who was the number 2 quarterback recruit in this class, very much more of fitting that athletic profile that you were just referring to in terms of having some mobility? Or is it possible that Austin Mack steps in, who's a 6'6" kid that was at Washington with DeBoer and transferred and has been in that system and has worked with Ryan Grubb before, because Grubb was out there at Washington and just was gone for this 1 year. So the Simpson thing is really fascinating because he has the profile recruiting wise, but the recruiting industry is not wrong about anything as much as it's wrong about quarterbacks, and we're going to talk about that, I'm sure, a few times tonight. But I look at Simpson, and it's like he's 6'6", and he's a big kind of statuesque player. He's not mobile at all, though. And I think with this Alabama team, as good as Ryan Williams is and as good as these receivers are, I do have questions about the run game because Milroe papered over a lot of problems on the offensive line last year.
Interesting. Yeah, and they actually were above average in terms of running game adjusted for opponent. Now, part of that's probably going to be just you're playing rough defenses in the SEC every week, and like I said, only one wasn't elite. Good point on that, though. I don't watch a ton of Bama games, so that's something to watch out. I was going to ask you, Robert. Is the only question about Alabama just the quarterback here, but Graham brings up a good point about the offensive line, that you get a super athlete in the backfield, and that just papers over that, as he said.
Yeah, every time you have an O-line and you start giving quarterbacks 3, 4, 5 seconds to throw, I don't think it matters that much. I think you will be able to find stuff. And not only that, with the O-line, you're going to be able to run the ball too, right? I'm sure Alabama's got some running back somewhere that they can just hand the ball off to and get 5 yards of carry, especially with that strong O-line against a weaker, they play ULM week 2. Don't think that's going to be too hard. This is the thing. I think in terms of competitive with the SEC, I mean, it was interesting last year. I was a bit more bearish on Alabama last year. I think I was a tad wrong on that. They were better than I thought they were, but they also did struggle, though, right? This was a 3-loss team last year, 4 losses if you include the ball. I thought they might have been a bit worse, but they looked dominant at times, but then in other times, like against just Oklahoma there, they did not look like themselves against Oklahoma. They lost to Vanderbilt, and then they lost at Tennessee. They lost to Tennessee at Tennessee. So it was a very weird year for me. But again, the thing was, I thought there was going to be the transition year because obviously you're going from the Nick Saban offense to the Kalen DeBoer Washington offense, which is let's throw for 500 yards. And I think he also needed to evolve too to go be like, because I think the Washington offense was that because he was able to recruit Michael Penix Jr. and 3 really good wide receivers. And it's cool, let's just throw the ball a bunch. But I think now it's like, hey, actually, we've just got these amazing offensive linemen, and we're so deep at every position, we can actually run the ball sometimes. And I think he was experimenting with what proportions to do everything with. And I think now that he's had a year under his belt here, I do think he is an elite coach. I think he is an elite coach. And this team will, Kalen DeBoer led either, if it's Alabama or at some other school, I don't think, he's probably safe this year as well, but you never know with Alabama. But at one point, he will be, given the resources of, say, an Alabama or another SEC school, this will be an absolutely terrifying, this will be a championship-winning team. I don't know if Ty Simpson's the quarterback to win that championship, but, this, at some point, he will win an SEC/national championship with a team from Alabama with the rate they're going.
I think so. Sorry, Graham. Sounded like you were going to say something there. Go ahead, please.
No, I think what's interesting for me, I was just looking back and just looking in straight O-line run push, right? I got to note some of my stuff here. Alabama returns all this experience on the offensive line, which is great. But they were 86th in O-line run push last year in the FBS. And when you've got a Jalen Milroe who can just break the traditional run structure of between the tackles or off tackle, but that's what I was referring to with saying he papered over some stuff. But I look at the bringing Grubb back, and what I think in my mind is this guy is an explosive pass play doctor, right? That's what he does historically everywhere he goes. And so I'm inclined to go back and look at Alabama last year, and it's like, how were they as an explosive passing team? They were 9th in explosive passing. Their issue, I think, as a football team was not a lack of big plays. I think it was a over-dependency on big plays. And that is my question with Ty Simpson, because I think a guy that has his arm strength and his kind of just physical makeup, probably a good deep ball thrower. That's probably maybe the best thing he's going to do. And they've got Ryan Williams on the outside. They've got good receivers. That's not the issue. And they're going to play a lot of games where their receivers are just better than the corners they face. But I do think you get into games against Georgia or LSU or Oklahoma, like if you've got some good front sevens that you face, or maybe you see Texas in an SEC championship, like where do those methodical drives come from? And I think that is the challenge for Ty Simpson is, can you be a guy that hits a 10-yard in on 3rd and 7 and patiently wait for it to come open and not stare it down and have a safety pick six it the other way? And we'll see. But I think there's definitely this recruited talent there with Bama. This is the crux of this NIL era, and I'll hit on that more when we get to Georgia. But there's some of this time where these guys come in and they're highly recruited, and I don't know that's as predictive as it once was, because it's a little bit hard to measure just how motivated they are and how well they're going to gel.
That's the thing, the fit in, you never know until it's like there's live bullets. And at some point it's like, oh boy, this didn't work. Now what do I do? It's tough. From a guy who's seen his offensive line rebuilt annually through the portal here, I speak from firsthand experience. Yeah, you snobs at Georgia don't have to worry about that. Congratulations.
Yet. We all have our yet.
Okay, fair enough. All right, next, Auburn Tigers, they get a new quarterback, or I might be a little mean and say, hey, they get a quarterback now, which they didn't have last year. Cam Coleman returns. He amassed 376 Ryan in that passing game somehow. Couple of good ads here through the portal. They add Eric Singleton from Georgia Tech. He was 95th in the country in Ryan, and Horatio Fields, I can't remember where he was. It was a rebuild last year. I don't know I think Robert and I were early to that, probably early to recognize that than most, but they do have the highest returning starts, not starters, but starts on the offensive line, and the highest prime starts. So they have a lot of experience who are going to be guys on the O-line who are going to be playing their best ball. Their offense wasn't that bad. That quarterback position just absolutely killed them, though. Defensively, they had the fifth best run defense in all of FBS when I adjust for quality of opponent. I don't know if you guys saw this. They only have 2 road games after September.
Mm-hmm.
Texas A&M is at the end of September. Then they only on the road for 2 more games. It's crazy. The season win total is 7.5. The over's taking some money. I think they're somewhat undervalued. Let me just get you started on Auburn with this, Graham. Can we just throw out last year for Jackson Arnold because he had no offensive line, nobody to throw the ball to, and just hope he's the same guy that Oklahoma recruited?
I'm not sure you can totally throw it out. I think that what you saw last year from Arnold, did they have good receivers? No, they did not. But I do still have questions. He needs to show me something from a processing standpoint, right? I need to see this guy get through some reads and make some decisions and recognize when guys are open. And I'm not saying he can't do it, but I haven't seen him do it. So that's my
We can't rule him out or in at this point. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's extremely fair. But I also think that if they get good quarterback play, I saw them up close and personal last year. It's like that offensive line looks the part. That defense, it's beginning to look the part. Those receivers 100% look the part. I'm just not sure that like the Hugh Freeze thing, it could go boomer. It's like a meme coin or something, right? You might buy 2,000 units of it for a penny and get rich, or you could lose your house and your family. I don't know what's ever going to happen with Hugh Freeze. Is he in the Vegas Lounge Act portion of his career? Quite possibly, but he may have one more hit on him.
When you say the Hugh Freeze thing,
Mm-hmm.
let's be clear, it's the Hugh Freeze era at Auburn, because when you say Hugh Freeze thing, that can mean a lot of things, and a lot of them not good. So,
Sure.
Just to be clear,
Care about the football stuff, but
yes, okay, yes,
like what at Ole Miss, it's fine to basically do what Lane continues to do there, right? Where it's like you have a team that is capable of supernovaing on any weekend, and in Hughes' era, it was like we'll beat Alabama a couple years in a row, and then we're going to lose to Brett Bielema's Arkansas program and cost ourselves a chance to play for an SEC title. And like at Auburn, that doesn't fly with them. It should at this point because they haven't had an above 500 season since Malzahn left, but there is just that's my question for him is I know that when Georgia comes to town and Auburn's coming off a bye, he's going to have it schemed up, and I could see them winning that game. I really could. But I also don't know that they're not going to lose to Missouri the next week or go on the road at Arkansas and lay an egg. Like, they are prone to do that. And so when betting a win total, that's the concern for me is, oh, man, am I going to look up in October and think this is going over because I got one of these kind of borderline wins, and then he's going to give 2 back down the stretch.
Yeah. And that's the kind of thing, as you point out, that'll upset about 19 of the 33 people that pretend they're athletic director at Auburn. Robert, just the lack of a quarterback, we cashed on that under last year. I think they've got it fixed. I think Gray makes a good point. Can't rule Arnold in or out at this point. You have a stronger feeling about this year versus last?
Yeah, Peyton Thorne was not the answer, and we said Peyton Thorne was not the answer, and that he wasn't the answer. I think somehow he's in the NFL. I think I saw him on like a box score for an NFL preseason game, and I don't know who did that, but that was a bad idea too. But no, an apex of 50 for last year for Jackson Arnold, that's the best we could do. We're Auburn guys. Like, come on, what are we doing here? I get, okay, you need a quarterback, but there was better quarterbacks. Like, okay, yeah, like the Mensa, Mateer, like you couldn't get in the market for those guys. You had to go after Oklahoma's retread. Okay, if that's the best you got, but I'd want to have seen better. Okay, yeah, their returning stuff is pretty good. But again, let's say Jackson Arnold does come back a bit. Let's say he gets a little bit better this year. Let's say he looks a bit more like the recruit that was promised when he was signed. Okay, but again, there's that insane volatility. Like just last year, they played Alabama A&M, an FCS team, fine. They won 73-3. Arguably one of the more dominant scores in all of college football last year. 33-3, not really better than that. And then the next week they lost to Cal 14-21, and Peyton Thorne threw 4 interceptions. What are we doing here? And that was actually at home, by the way, which is insane. But that's like, what are we doing here? How is this dual? Like, how can you do this? Like, how can you? And I mean, okay, whatever. Alabama, A&M, that like, but again, there's a slew of these. They lost to Arkansas last year. They actually lost to Jackson Arnold, Oklahoma. Maybe that's why they decided to pick him up. They lost at Georgia. They won at Kentucky. They beat ULM. They beat Texas A&M somehow, and then they lose to Alabama in the season finale. And then I think they went to a bowl game. No, they didn't go to a bowl game. 5-7 really didn't. So this is the thing. I can't, like, again, as he said, right? Yeah, they could beat Georgia and then the next week lose to Missouri, right? Or they could lose at Arkansas, right? Like, you never know with this team. And it's so insanely variable from week to week that I can't touch it. I don't want to necessarily touch the under 7.5, but I definitely am not. I'm not running up to bet the over. I'm definitely not running to bet the over.
Yeah, you're not going to lay 165 for anything, I think, at this point. All right. Roberts, Florida Gators. It's only his 4th season.
Florida Gators, okay.
Yes, he's a Florida guy.
Are you?
Fan.
No, that's fine. I'm just curious.
Only his 4th season. It's been like a dog years thing. It feels like it's been 10 years. And I'm a Billy Napier fan. Just totally overlooked. Aside from DJ Lagway, this is a good team somehow. Only 5 teams in the SEC were basically statistically well above average on offense and defense, and this is one of them. And probably a big part of that is, we talked about going into last season, the brutal schedule that they had. I think you just play okay, and you're going to help your metrics a lot in that way. The OL is really experienced. A lot of green here. Good sign. The wide receiver room is taking a step back, it looks like. They didn't really add much Ryan through the portal. DJ Lagway is a very talented guy. This is going to really test that to see how much he has to create versus what he has there in terms of receivers. Ron Roberts was hired away, I believe, from Auburn, and he made a big difference in the defense. I had them as a negative 5.9 power rating in 23, and he increased that by, 14.5 points. That is incredible. That's just absurd. 70 returning starts is elite, so we should see probably a little even more improvement this year. The stretch here from at LSU to at Georgia is absurd. You're at LSU, hosting Miami, hosting Texas A&M. Okay, you get a little bit of breather here, and then you exhale from Mississippi State, so you get punched in the face. It's not at Georgia, so that's the cocktail party, so it's versus. Again, I don't know what Billy Napier did to piss off the SEC schedule maker, but man, that's about as rough as it gets. 7.5, the under's taking a little money. I think that's reasonable to me. Robert and I joked about last year about the coach of the year in the SEC was, quote, capital F, fired Billy Napier once they fired him.
Yeah.
He became like a better guy.
Yeah.
Can he be that guy this year, Graham?
I really like Billy. I do. Just as a human being, I think he's a good guy. And I've gone my media career journey happened on accident, and so I've gone from the fan side to the other side of the table and see how the sausage gets made. And Napier's a good guy, man. I really like him. I think that we are doing this thing across the SEC right now with some of these young, up-and-coming, talented quarterbacks where there's just this assumption that everything's going to be good and everything's going to go well. And I don't question DJ Lagway's talent at all. I was at Elite 11 his year. I thought he was just, from pure physical tools standpoint, the best guy there. And Ola was out there and a lot of guys. But my concern with Lagway is it's really not a knock on him. It's just I do think that a lot of people underappreciated like how good Graham Mertz was at a lot of things in terms of just he was a very efficient quarterback. He was not as explosive as Lagway, and I look at Lagway like if you look at all SEC quarterbacks, he had the second best completion percentage of any on 20-plus yard throws, right? There's explosiveness there, but I do have questions about he's not a guy that, like, I think Napier's done a really good job of papering over in ways and creating easy throws for him and easy reads. And when you get to some tougher defenses, that can take some of that stuff away and that tackle and don't allow a bunch of yards after the catch on stuff behind the line of scrimmage. Last year, he was just a 51% passer on dropbacks where he was in the pocket for 2.5+ seconds. And
wow.
Mertz was a 71% passer in that same offense in under those same conditions, and they had an identical average time to throw in those scenarios. So that's and he had 8 DJ, all 5 of his interceptions came in those situations. You still see some brain farts with him, right? Where he throws it and it's, what do you see in there? We'll see. This is college football. Guys develop, and if the light comes on for him, it's like supernova.
Yeah. Robert, this is your team. We talked about Billy Napier and the whole joke about him being fired. And I don't know. You're closer to this than I am. What's your feeling? I mean, first of all, that schedule stretch between LSU and at Georgia. My gosh.
No, that is pretty crazy. I will say you do host Miami, so that's not necessarily the worst, but that is Carson Beck. That was Georgia quarterback from last year, so maybe it's not necessarily the easiest. Texas, that could be terrifying. Texas A&M, again, another pretty good school as well. At Mississippi State, sure, but at Georgia, that's not fun. And then, but then you still have Ole Miss and Tennessee after that, and maybe Florida State's something. I don't know. But look, it's not an easy schedule. We talked about last year how the schedule was ridiculous. They somehow managed to go 8-5. And now this year, this the 12th hardest. Like last year, it was the hardest schedule. This year, it's just the 12th, so it's easy now. We're good, right? Whole 12 schedule is easier now. No, there are questions on this. Legway is good, definitely has some talent. Only 107 Apex, though. Wish that was a little higher, but that's fair. I think there is a lot of bright spots in his game, but I think there are some negatives. And I think we'll have to see how this goes. I obviously will be paying attention to Florida. I loved kind of Florida last year in that role of underdog. Like there was a lot of times when you got great basically leverage on them. I think when they were at LSU, you were catching like 3 or 4 points. At Tennessee, you were getting like 14. I love when you get Florida in these kind of underdog situations, and they generally are able to perform well in those. But when suddenly there's expectations put on, when Florida's the favorite, like week 1, they were 2-point underdogs to Miami, got crushed 41-14. A couple weeks later, they were +3 versus Texas A&M, lost 33-20. So this is the thing where it's like when you put expectations on this team, sometimes they do have some issues with that. But when you don't put expectations on them, then suddenly they're able to flourish. You worry about that. Obviously, Billy Napier is definitely coming into the season on the hot seat. He will have to do something. Is 8-5 good enough? I don't know. It might be if he can get to 7-5 and then win the bowl. Maybe that's enough to keep his job for one more year. But that stretch is brutal. We're gonna have to see how LSU is this year. Miami, but like Texas A&M. I think best case scenario, you're 1-1 through that. Most likely 0-2 probably. And if you're not able to be competitive with the top of the SEC, then is that a successful season? I don't know. They're clearly rebuilding, but like rebuilding to what? At a certain point, you have to beat these teams. I don't know if they have that stopping power this year. So we'll have to see. I'm excited, and I do want to see what this team can do. We'll get a test of them in just a few weeks in LSU. But yeah, I don't want to touch the over 7.5. I'm a little worried that this could, there's a path where I see this kind of exploding, maybe around the LSU game or Miami. Like, I could see, obviously you could see a good season, but I could 100% see like a regression, like maybe a 7-5 or a 6-6 season, and then that's it for Napier, right?
All right. The Georgia Bulldogs, Graham's very own. Don't want to be mean to you, Graham, and all the people that you brought along with you. Thank you very much, you all. I actually had this team rated 5th in the SEC last season. They were a tough read, up and down. They also, here's where it gets really weird. They had significant good luck. They were one of the luckiest teams in all of FBS. That tends to regress. Carson Beck is no longer with the program. Gunnar Stockton, this is where it gets really interesting. If I see a 71 Apex, it's only one start, I'm going to have questions. But you dig a little deeper, and my gosh. All right, 71 Apex, but it was against Texas, who had a defensive Apex of 7, which is absurd. That's like bad NFL team kind of level of defense here. The best pass defense in all of FBS. And then, oh, by the way, the other game was Notre Dame, who had a merely mortal 33, which is still crazy good. The 4th best pass defense in FBS. Mr. Stockton, to be continued, or to be determined, I guess I'd say. Another team, Georgia, like I said about Alabama, no transfers on the offensive line. I think that's one of those elite signs where you really got your house in order. And They recruit very well and they keep them. That's what every program wants. My gosh. They add Noah Thomas with a 341 Ryan at A&M and Zachariah Branch 262 Ryan, which is good at my very own USC. I'll just say this: he had an interesting year.
Yeah,
he had a lot of fair catches on punts when there was nobody around him, and I just don't know if he was. He just didn't seem mentally right last year, so this might be what he needs.
Do you think he was hurt?
Defensively, I'm not worried. It's Kirby, and he's got the talent. It's just a question of how good will they be. They do catch both Texas and Alabama, but they get them at home. They only have 3 road games since Georgia Tech is at the neutral site, and I'm pretty comfortable saying there'll be more and more Bulldogs fans and Yellow Jackets fans there. Season win total is 9.5. That seems a little light to me. The over's getting crushed, so that makes it seem, if you're laying 170, they're reasonably valued. Graham, I want to throw it to you with this question about Georgia. With a long preamble here. As you can see, I'm wearing a t-shirt to pay homage to the footprint of the SEC. Kennesaw State.
Go Owls.
But I dress like a slob, so if I say, hey, I'm going to be the editor-in-chief of Vogue magazine, but believe me, nothing's going to change. It's still going to be Vogue. You're going to look at me and say, you have no chance, buddy. I bring this up, and just hang with me here. When Mike Bobo took over, he said, I'm going to run the Monken offense. And I thought, well, that's like me with the Vogue thing. I need to be convinced on Bobo. And Carson Beck was really, really good 2 years ago. He had an apex of like 160. He regressed a lot. I've asked, when we did the ACC program preview, I asked, what was it, our guest then? And he said he just said, look, I didn't see the receivers getting open. Now, whether that's a matter of the receivers weren't there or Bobo can't scheme them open, in English, that was just what he had to work with. You're always going to have an influx of receiver talent just through recruiting, and now you get these 2 nice transfers. Does that fix it, or is this a Bobo thing that still needs to be addressed?
I think, honestly, Mike Bobo deserved a Nobel Peace Prize for some of the things that he managed to figure out last year. Truthfully, I do. And I've been a Bobo detractor for a long time, and I'm not saying the guy is God's gift to the offensive football philosophy or anything like that, but you look at last year, Georgia's starting receivers, I liked what you said, that you had them rated 5th in the SEC. I don't think that's an inappropriate rating. Georgia's starting receivers were 1, 2, and 3 in the conference in drops. 1st, 2nd, and 3rd.
Oh,
their X, their Z, their slot. Their run game, 85th in yards per carry in the FBS, 95th in explosive rush in the FBS. And the receivers, not just they dropped balls plenty, but they struggled to get open because you had 2 guys on your roster who were supposed to be your outside receivers. One of them gets dismissed from the team in spring, and then another one of them has an incident that ended up not actually being an incident, but they benched him while that was being resolved. Point being, all of a sudden you've got a guy in Dylan Bell who this spring is basically playing a gadget role and is lining up in the backfield, occasionally taking some snaps. Maybe he'll play 10 to 12 snaps a game at receiver. He was playing 40, 50 snaps a game as your starting X receiver. So everything got shifted around like that. I think they figured out the receiver room. If there's one thing I'm confident about from Georgia's fall camp, it's that. I want to see how Bobo handles having all these weapons and how he handles them in a way that helps Gunnar Stockton, because there's a lot we still don't know about Gunnar Stockton. I don't think he was the reason they lost that Notre Dame game, but I have this side of things where it's like all those things that went wrong last year went wrong, and they also won an SEC title, so it's
yeah.
Is the Piper going to come and get paid this year, or is that just the floor? And I do think we talked about the NIL thing, the culture thing. I was sitting in the press conference with Kirby the first day of spring practice. Last question he took of that press conference was, what do you want to learn about your football team this spring? And it was like, literally what he said was, I want to learn if they care more about football than their NIL revenue streams. And so that's been the thing this offseason is fire, passion, energy over and over. I think that staying with Stockton and not going to the portal and all that also plays into that, because he's one of those guys that fits that, but he's just a Georgia kid, and just that's not, he's there to play football. He's not really there for the NIL stuff. But I am curious, because if he's, I'll put it this way, I think I know enough this 2 scrimmages into fall camp, and just from what I've heard, I think if they can get good quarterback play, not elite, not even necessarily great all the time, but if they can get good quarterback play and not have somebody that's turning the football over like Beck was last year, I think that by the time they get to November and some of this young talent continues to grow and develop, I think they'll be able to like compete with anybody. I think they could, on a good day, beat anybody, because this is Kirby Smart's most talented roster. They have 72 former 4- and 5-star recruits. They are an 84% blue chip ratio. They've never been higher than 80, and that includes post-transfer stuff. So they've got
that says
bodies.
A lot, by the way. This isn't like saying, hey, this is the best Arizona State team we've ever had.
Right. Yeah, and I think that they've snuck under the radar here, but
yeah, weirdly.
Yeah, their defense, they had 7 guys drafted last year, but they were the worst statistically rushing the defense they've had since 2016 when Kirby arrived. They worst yards per play for any defense he's had since 2016. And a lot of those guys, like Michael Williams, fantastic football player, but he goes in spring, like there's talk like he might be going to USC. He might transfer to USC if the NIL doesn't get upped. And then you turn around in fall camp and it's like you're trying to lead the team. Doesn't really work that well. So I think they've got the chemistry thing figured out, but they're going to be young. They're going to be young on the defensive line. The back 7, I think, will be very good on the defense. But the offensive line last year was a huge problem as well. To be fair to Beck, and to be fair to Stockton, they were basically playing with 1.5 healthy offensive tackles in that Notre Dame game. So no, for sure, but I think they'll be fun, if that's fair to say. I think they'll be entertaining.
Let me two follow-ups on what you said there. Now, one, again, not to pick on the kid, but because I know this from up close and personal, I'm wondering what you guys get out of Zachariah Branch, because as you described Dylan Bell, I see a lot of that in Zachariah Branch. I don't see him as a guy that you're going to throw out there as a starting wide receiver in the SEC, where he's just going to be like, yeah, you're going to throw it to me 12 times today. He seems like a gadget plus guy, if you will. And I wonder if that's duplicative. I don't know. I'm not an X and O guy, but when I watch with my own eyes, I get a little more. So that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think he's definitely a slot receiver to them, and exclusively a slot receiver. I'm not sure if he played outside some at USC or not, but they like him, man. They do. And
he's electric.
I can't square it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
You look at him, you fall in love with him. It's, oh my gosh, this guy. Get him the ball 30 times a game. And that's where it gets a little weird. I don't know. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I have my own curiosities about that as well, just because I'm like, was it a Miller Moss thing maybe? Or was there something there? I
didn't think about that.
His freshman year was really good, at least. But even as a returner last year, it didn't seem like he was the same player. I don't know if there was a physical thing wrong with him or not, but I expect him to play starter-level snaps for them, and I think that they will find ways to get him the ball without maybe necessarily asking him to do a bunch of things that are really complex. But like even in the spring game, he caught like a pretty impressive contested downfield 50-50 ball where he like walled off a starting safety and went up and got it. And it doesn't seem like from USC people that I've talked to, that's something he was doing in California.
Yeah, no, maybe just, I don't know, he was enjoying the weather and girls out here.
It's easy to do.
It is. Robert, you and I were, I don't want to say tough, but I guess I would consider myself a Georgia truther last year, where I said I didn't like their postseason chances. There was stuff to like, but there were just questions, and Graham just went over them all. Do you think if he's more optimistic, I think that's a reason we got to be more optimistic about him this year?
Yeah, I think last year they did win an SEC championship. I think there was a very real possibility that they could have lost to Georgia Tech in that final game of the season, regular season. Now, that wouldn't have actually affected them for the SEC championship, but that would have mattered, I think. Again, a very weird year in the SEC. This is a team that played Texas in the regular season, crushed them, and yet got crushed by Ole Miss. It was a very weird year where I think that there was basically parity at the top of the SEC. Like Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, and South Carolina were all up there at the top, and any of them could beat anybody on any given day. It was just kind of the way the schedule worked out, who got to go to the playoff or not. And I didn't particularly love Carson Beck. I think it is interesting sticking with Gunnar Stockton. It shows a lot of faith in him. Yeah, you had pretty good apex versus Texas. Texas is a very good team, and Notre Dame was as well. But the thing is, I think this team is very lucky. They won the SEC anyways, but like they won the SEC and they didn't have to play they didn't have to play in the first round of the playoff. And if they had, that would have been I would have very much loved to see that data point, because I think now it depends on who they would have played. I'm not even sure who that would have even been. Would that have been Clemson? I guess you could just you could call it Clemson, just flip Texas and Georgia. I think that game is very close. I think maybe Georgia wins it. Maybe Georgia scrapes through, but then they probably aren't getting past Arizona State. Like, this is the thing. Now, again, different new year, different team. We need to see how Gunnar Stockton, basically, how he improves. If he improves, I don't love that number, but again, as you mentioned, like, really tough opponents versus Texas and Notre Dame. And I believe, if I remember correctly, he was thrown in the middle of the SEC championship game, if I'm not mistaken. He was the middle point of it as well. Yeah. But it's weird because I bet on Georgia when they played Texas twice last year. I bet on Georgia both times and I felt confident in both times. The model loved it and I loved it too, because it's like, just Kirby Smart is just a better coach than Steve Sarkisian. He's just a better coach than him, 100%. Like, I bet on it and I had complete faith of it. And the thing is, like, Kirby Smart is one of the best coaches in college football, 100%. But it's just the fact that once they started, like, Notre Dame, really good coach too, right? Alabama, good coach, right? Once you start getting the other teams that are also coached well, and maybe even in some cases have some superior talent to you, I don't know if he's able to beat them. With the talent he had last year, it was very unclear. This year, we're going to have to see how they do. But honestly, that Georgia Tech game was a bit terrifying. Now again, it's a rivalry game, neutral site, night game. That was a very scary game if you're a Georgia fan. But again, next 2 weeks later, you won the SEC. Actually, no, 1 week later, you won the SEC championship, right? So not the most concerning. But again, you were able to beat Steve Sarkisian because you're a better coach than Steve Sarkisian. But like, what happens when you have to go play Kalen DeBoer? And not so much that necessarily they're a better coach than you, but the coaching mismatch is a lot smaller than the difference between Kirby Smart and Steve Sarkisian. That would be my concern for Georgia this year. They will be in the conference championship. Like, they're going to be in the picture. They could easily make the playoff. I don't know if they're going to win the conference or not. I think 9.5 is about right. I could see like a 9-3, 10-2. I think that's going to be the line. I think I'm going to go with them against Texas again. I don't care. They'll probably beat Texas. But Alabama is going to be tough. Florida could be sneakily tough, and Tennessee could be tough as well. Mississippi probably going to take a bit of step back, and Georgia Tech, no idea what that's going to be. So those 4 games are probably going to determine whether or not they're going to the SEC championship game or if they're just going to go to the first round of the playoff.
Yeah, I think what you said is very indicative of, I'm trying to say this without getting myself in trouble. I was at a event recently with a bunch of current UGA athletes, and the topic of that Alabama game last year came up, which they fell down 28-0, and there was basically this conversation that happened where there was a lack of trust maybe in the level of preparation in certain key players on the team, and that seemed to be this theme, I think, throughout the season. And the Texas game, there was, and it's not that I don't think they were up for that Alabama game. I think that they were maybe 2 up, and there was an anxiety to all of that. And you heard Kirby Smart use the word anxiety a lot last year in press conferences and stuff. And I never heard him talk about that. Like, I watched him chew Stetson Bennett out after going to the locker room up 3 touchdowns on Michigan in an Orange Bowl. And it was like he was afraid he was going to lose his guys at certain points. And something about that team was not right, and there was times where they would get up and they would be right, and they would push Texas around. And then, like that Texas game that they won in Austin, they dominated Texas in many ways, and Carson turned it over 3 times in that game. And so I think it was just indicative of In the frustration, I think that a lot of Georgia fans probably had about this team was you would see those flashes and you would wonder, why is UMass running for 250 yards on us? And I think that they were broken in that way. And the mission of the offseason has seemed to be to fix that. We'll find out if they did or not. But I just don't know, like, in terms of how you got to – I think Kirby Smart was shocked by how NIL affected his roster last year and that they had been immune to all of that stuff up until then. And now they're trying to get back to how they did business, and we'll see if they do. But it's a fascinating year for them. It really is.
And when you say how it affected their roster, like in a leadership
way,
/ culture
yes,
thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to say Kirby obviously knows how to do culture, but there's only so much a coach can do.
In terms of just the dynamics and the engagement. And he talked a lot about it this spring and less so this summer, but he even talked about it at SEC Media Days. He believes genuinely that college football players are comfortable now in a way that they have never been, and he thinks that is a good thing. He's glad that these guys are getting paid, but he's on this whole kick of, if we don't love football and we play a team that loves football, we're going to probably lose. And I think that Georgia Tech game is one of those examples. That was an eye-opener for him because he watched Haynes King, who is not a crazy talented quarterback. He doesn't do all the things on paper that the NFL wants, but God, if he didn't like will his way to the first down marker over and control the tempo of that game. I think he's trying to, like, can I get my 84% blue chip roster to play like that? And I don't know. I really don't know. But I do think, like, when you talk about Bobo, where this conversation began, you look at all these games. Florida, Carson has 3 interceptions within the first, I think, 40 minutes of that game or so, maybe 35 minutes. Texas, same story. And there was a lot of times where the middle of the field basically got taken away for them because they didn't trust what he was seeing over the middle of the field. And then you've got these receiver problems where your guys don't get open just on straight go routes, and now you can't run slants with them comfortably into cover 2. He did a good job of finding end arounds and creative things to create offense. So if they've got the amount of weapons that they seem to think they have, then I think that their offense could surprise a lot of people. But they got to run the ball. They didn't run the ball last year. They got to get back to running the ball. They've got 8 top 100 recruits, and they're too deep on the offensive line. If you guys can't run the ball, then somebody needs to get fired. That's my position on it.
Yeah. Just one last thing on Georgia is, going long time ago, Lou Holtz said to build a national championship team, you need a roster that's half All-Americans and half guys that would just kill to play for your school. That's the way you described Gunnar Stockton. I think that's what I love, like that kind of insight. You've got the latter guy there. Not that he's not talented, but though you say a Georgia kid that just wants to play football, you need those guys. You can't just make it like the Miami Heat of 2000 whatever. Right?
Yeah. No, I think that's very well said. Yeah, and I think that they had that with Stetson Bennett to a certain degree.
Exactly.
And they seem to be more comfortable in that scenario.
Yep. All right. Maybe not so comfortable. Brian Kelly is like sometimes on the hot seat and sometimes just love it there. Who knows? Another team that had significant good luck last year. I'm going to be the first turd to jump into the punch bowl on this one. Garrett Nussmeier was not really great last year, guys. 100 apex. Average. Good for a first-year start in the SEC, but he's not Jaden Daniels 2.0, guys. It's a different kind of guy. This team was... get my laser pointer here. This team was 6th in Apex Plus. That's nice, but 6th in passing offense in the SEC? That's not the narrative that I'm getting this offseason. I'm just going to get off the rails here. I'm tired of the Nussmeier thing here. They're 4th in the SEC... in 2025, Ryan, so they're starting with it from a good position in the wide receiver room, but they are well behind Bama and Georgia in terms of the Ryan that's coming back. Pieces, they're not starting from in front here. The defensive rating was nope. Strike that. Blake Baker made a improvement. Now a defensive rating from -2.1 to 3.7. 5, almost 6-point improvement is significant, but they are still well behind being even a good SEC defense here. The season win total is 8.5. The over's taking a lot of money. Shout out to my guy Hambone. I love you, bro, but this team is way overvalued here. I look at it, and maybe if I'm as skeptical, and I saw you agreeing with Graham, I just don't see how this team, and I like Brian Kelly too. I'm like his last true believer on this face of the earth here.
Wow.
Going way back to the Chips and the Bearcats. I just don't see how this team, I'll put it this way. When Army played Oklahoma and scared the life out of Lincoln Riley, you know what happened. Oh, Army did the Army thing and they scared him, right? They just did the Army thing. I don't know what the LSU thing is, how they beat a better talented team. I just don't get that. And that's tough for a program with these kind of expectations. And my pro forma question, because you seem to be agreeing with me, was, am I being too hard on Nussmeier here, Graham?
It's funny because I'm looking at my notes for LSU, and I literally have a bullet point that says Nussmeier's talked about as perhaps the most known commodity in the SEC, but he is really the ultimate hot/cold king. And I feel like he's a guy who could, in baseball terms, come out and throw a no-hitter, and he could also get tacked up for 7 runs and 1 2/3. And I don't know how you wager on that comfortably over the course of a season to begin with. But yeah, I also think they lost Campbell, the offensive tackle. It was the 6th overall pick to the Patriots. Like they couldn't run the ball last year with the offensive line that had 2 tackles who had been 3, I think, and 4-year starters. So I'm very curious how they replace that, and maybe just meeting in the middle on the run and pass would help them. But no, I don't think you're too hard on Nussmeier. He loses Mason Taylor, he loses Kyron Lacey, like he loses a lot of good wide receivers. I know that they get Chris Hilton back, who they like, and was supposed to be the guy at one point last year in the preseason. But they're so portal dependent in my mind. When you look at Berrien Brown, who has been inconsistent his entire career, he might be the SEC or Kentucky version, that the way that you think of Zach Branch, right? Like electric returner and all those things. But this was the weakest transfer portal that we have ever seen since this whole portal era started, by far. And when you're talking about we took 15 transfers, that doesn't compute to me as – that means you missed a lot in recruiting and you're trying to caulk those holes. But the quality of caulk on the market right now is just not good enough to do it at a SEC top elite level.
Yeah, great. You showed Western Michigan's who's boss in terms of if you want to pull a guy from their roster, but how does that translate to this conference? Yeah. That's a different question here.
Robert's going to tell us.
Have you heard of this talk about Nussmeier like literally being like a Heisman, if not a favorite, behind here's another episode, Cade Klubnik, but
yeah, so
he's like been in top 3 mentions, right?
Yeah, so I'm just going to quote you the NFL Draft 2025 number and overall pick odds. First overall, Garrett Nussmeier, plus 350.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Yeah. And then Drew Aller is second at plus 375. Now, the reason it's not Archie Manning is because his grandfather came out and said he's not going to go to the NFL next year, which apparently we trade on that. I don't know, but that's insane having Nussmeier number 1. That's nuts. And Drew Aller behind Nussmeier. That seems
I would say
crazy.
Drew Aller's not any better.
That's actually, I could agree with that, but it just seems crazy that we're just putting, like, there's other quarterbacks I'd rather take rather than Nussmeier first. I think people think Nussmeier is this amazingly god-tier quarterback because they see some of the LSU box scores from last year and they're like, they scored like 1 billion points, right? He's got to be amazing. And I think they don't realize that there are other things other than just scoring 44 points versus Nichols last year. This is the thing. Even then, okay, you scored 42 against South Alabama. There was a lot of games they had problems with last year. They lost to USC. USC, not the greatest team last year. They did lose to them, right? So I think here's the thing, and it's really annoying because, watch, week 1, they'll beat Clemson, and people are like, there we go, told you LSU was good. I think Clemson's pretty bad too, right? So this is the thing, like, they could easily beat Clemson. I have no idea what's Clemson third somehow. I'm not sure why they're third, but whatever. They could beat Clemson, and people are going to be like, LSU's back, Brian Kelly's job safe, right? No, that is not true. But this is the thing. 8.5 seems pretty rich. I think they're going to be a middle, above average SEC team. But are they bad? Florida's going to be a tough game for them. At Ole Miss potentially could be. South Carolina. Diego Pavia at Vanderbilt. Texas A&M. Alabama. That's a massive stretch. It goes from basically, September through to mid-October. And then we get Arkansas, and then you end off at Oklahoma. right? That's a brutal stretch. I don't know. I think a middle tier SEC team, but like again, if you don't beat Florida, if you go 0-2 versus Florida and Ole Miss, Brian Kelly's not coaching here next year. I think it's pretty clear, right? That's the stakes here. And I think it wouldn't take much to have an 8-4 season and have that under cash. But again, they're going to I think they could beat Clemson. That's a bet against Clemson rather than on LSU. But we'll have to see. I think they're not as good as Alabama. They're probably not as good as Texas A&M. Like, they're not as good as the top schools. And I think that this year is probably going to prove that.
Yeah, Graham, since you're in the SEC footprint,
Yeah.
you're the guy I have to ask this question to in this context, because I've been talking about another person many times in this preseason. And just supposing that it goes as Robert says and Kelly isn't back, would LSU take a chance on John Summerall, or is that too much of a stretch?
They should.
Okay,
I'll put it this way.
Should and would are different things, so that's a thing.
Yeah, and I think that they didn't hire Napier. Like, I think if Napier had been at a program that wasn't in the state of Louisiana, that would have
that was it?
Felt different. Yeah, I do. I think that there's a superiority kind of thing there for LSU in terms of we're the only power program in the state, and we're going to go. And just the way Scott Woodward operates as an athletic director, he hired Kim Mulkey, and he wants to hire these established.
He's the splash guy.
Yeah, he's the splash guy. And that's great, but at the end of the day, Brian Kelly was a really good coach at Notre Dame, and you touched on that earlier. And
awesome before that.
Yes, and awesome before that. And
He was so good, he made Butch Jones look like a good coach. That's how good he was.
That's very well said, indeed. But I also think that Brian Kelly is like a case study. Like Kelly and then Shane Beamer on the other side of the spectrum at South Carolina are a case study, and like sometimes culture fit does matter in coaching. And I just cannot get used to looking on LSU's sideline and seeing Brian Kelly standing down there. It just doesn't compute in my brain, and that's not a metric, that's not a statistic. I know that's just a thing to throw out there, but my point in all that with Summerall is to say they should hire him, because I've talked to people that let's just say things blew up on Kalen DeBoer. I'm not saying they're going to, but let's just say they did. I think that Summerall may be like a top 3 candidate at Alabama. Yeah, there's people that really like him that are in powerful seats across the SEC. And I think if the entire SEC as a whole lets him get back to his alma mater at Kentucky when Mark Stoops crashes and burns, that will be a coup for Kentucky, but it'll be a pretty big failure by a lot of other athletic directors.
He's too smart to go there. Come on. I know
the heart
when your
wants
school
what
calls,
the heart
there's
wants
a pull.
sometimes.
Man, come on.
I hope he's too smart.
Signetti's at Indiana, so anything can happen, right? All right. All right. Lane Kiffin, using his superpowers for good instead of evil now that he's not at USC anymore. New quarterback there, Austin Simmons at Ole Miss.
Good quarterback.
Yeah, the biggest Ryan winner in the entire portal here. More than 2 times what Florida State picked up, who I think was a runner-up in terms of what they portaled in. They add a power 4 wide receiver with a Ryan of 597, at 466, 270, 168, 164. This is plug and play if it works. This is what you want, and that's what he added. Now, this is, I think, where we see that difference between Ole Miss and those elite programs. The offensive line includes 3 transfers. Reminder, that's that magic number. 2 you can work. 3 is where it gets a little tricky. Pete Golding has been a brilliant hire. He raised the defensive rating of that team from negative 0.2 to 10.7 now. They were the best run defense in all of FBS last year, as is what they do. 5 transfers are going to start on defense. Weird scheduling thing. They have 4 straight home games and 3 straight home games. Sure. That 8.5 just looks high. I think I just need to understand more about Austin Simmons. So I think it's slightly overvalued. The question is, we talked about this already, Graham. Just, is this as good as a portal-reliant program can be? Is that what we're looking at?
I think that's a fair thing to say. The thing that I think we will probably be talking about a ton in 5 years, 10 years, as the 2024 Ole Miss roster filters out and starts having success in the NFL, and we see what happens and all that, is we're going to look back and say, I can't believe they didn't make a playoff with that roster.
Yeah.
That was, I thought, was around Georgia for the 21 defensive line that had just all those mutants on it, Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt. I mean, 3 first-round picks on the same line. And Trevon Walker, I'm sorry, a number 1 overall pick, so 4. And that was like maybe the closest thing I've seen to it since was what Ole Miss would trot out there in certain packages last year, and they didn't cash that in. And they are still extremely portal reliant, and this portal is weak. So on principle, even though I like Lane in terms of just, I think he's a plus value coach who puts his offensive players into really good situations, I'm like on principle just ready to fade them this year a little bit, because I just think the way that they are trying to growth hack in the SEC by not having to compete at the high school level isn't going to work if teams keep retaining their talent as well as they did this portal cycle.
Yeah, I think that's the other side of this NIL clarity and funding, is that teams are getting better at retaining vital parts, as we've talked about. Since, again, this is your backyard, Austin Simmons, what's the word on him?
I think he was a little bit like under the radar in certain ways as a recruit because he was an elite baseball player who wasn't going to recruiting camps and 7-on-7 tournaments in the offseason. He was off throwing 94 or 95 on a baseball diamond somewhere. But he came in and led that touchdown drive against Georgia last year that really set that game off in their direction after Dart had gotten picked on the opening drive. So they had a situation with him, to my knowledge, where he's talented enough, people saw enough of him on tape, where there was a lot of programs that are even higher profile than Ole Miss has become that I think would have loved to have tampered with him this offseason and bring him in. And
that says a lot right there.
Yeah, and they also, Lane, who I think has established himself as a pretty good quarterback guy, he was like, no, we need to pay this guy and we need to keep him, and they did. Yeah, I think he'll be legit, and that's the thing that gives me pause, but I still believe SEC football at the highest levels is really won and lost from the inside out, and I just don't think the lines of scrimmage will have it this year for them.
Yeah, I think so, Robert. If they didn't make the playoffs last year with everything set up, there's no way it can happen this year, correct?
Pretty much, yeah. Through last year, according to our rankings, this team was one of the better teams in college football. And They probably should have made the playoff. But they, because of all of that with Alabama and them and SMU and Clemson, they just didn't. And I think had they made it, right now, Jackson Dart's looking amazing, just playing in a couple preseason games for the Giants. And it's kind of like that, like Jackson Dart looked pretty good last year too, right? Like, it's really sad that this team didn't make it. I think had this team made it, they could have done something in the playoffs.
Yep.
But they didn't, and that's where we're at. Austin Simmons, I think.
So just real quick, to be clear.
Yeah.
They did it to themselves by losing to Kentucky.
Yeah, this wasn't the committee screwing them. Yes, just looking at that. Yeah, and Florida and LSU too. They lost to LSU in overtime, right? So it's not without reason. It's just that, like, if the committee, and again, this is the dumb part about the committee, if the committee was truly tasked with picking the best 12 teams, they would have been one of those 12 teams. But we have to look at dumb things like records in games, right? That's the problem, right? No, I agree. If they couldn't get it done last year, I don't think they're going to get it done this year. Austin Simmons, massive question mark on this. I think you have to, like, all questions begin and end with him on that. I think we're going to have to see how that goes, and if he's able to turn around and be better this year, great. If not, then I don't think he can get to Jackson Dart level. This might be a bit of a rebuilding year for Ole Miss. Yeah, I'm not sure if I want to bet the under, but there are some tough games on the schedule. Yeah. Probably we'll just leave this one.
The other thing is, I was doing this preview. No shock here. There are not many bad lines here. Everybody knows everything about the SEC. It's much easier to go fishing and hunting and gathering in our Conference USA. A lot of pieces there that we can pick from. Everybody knows everything here. All right, Oklahoma. I'm going to toss last season, and I'm tossing last season because of the wide receiver and offensive line injuries. I hear, Venables is on the hot seat. He was 10-2 2 years ago. Let's be reasonable here, people. He had a bad run of injury luck last year. Everybody's talking about John Mateer, the new quarterback, which rightfully... Nobody's talking about Ben Arbuckle, also known as the guy who actually created The current Cam Ward, thank you very much. That's the guy, people. Look at Cam Ward's first year versus second year, Washington State, when Ben Arbuckle took over. They are in a bad spot from a receiving standpoint, though. 523, they're 14th in the SEC in Ryan, so they're starting from way behind in the wide receiver room. The defensive rating last year was fourth in FBS, second overall in run defense, heavy returning experience. Not Venables is not Kirby, but just like Kirby, we're at the point where I'm never ever worried about the Oklahoma defense as long as Venables is there. I love these two games, week 2 against Michigan, the week 4 against Auburn. I have a feeling they can. I wouldn't be surprised if they go. I would not be surprised if they won both of those. I'll keep it at that. The season win total, they set the wrong number here. 6.5 is too low. The over's getting crushed at -180. That seems fair. It's still undervalued, but not playably. It just seems a bit simple here, Graham. Is this just, okay, now we have the right OC, now we have, and believe me, I was before last year, I'm not just like kissing butt here. I didn't like the Seth Luttrell hire. I said, this is stupid, this makes no sense, he's not a good OC. I love this OC hire. Is it just this simple? It's like, we got this dynamic quarterback and we have a brilliant OC. The defense is always going to be good, and we might make the playoffs?
It should be. Like, it
right?
feels that way.
It seems too simple.
There are some really concerning splits for Mateer in terms of P5 versus G5. But he also played behind Washington State's offensive line with Washington State's skill talent and all that. So it's tough to think that will translate. Personnel people I know like Mateer a lot more than I would think that they would like a guy that's barely 6'1" and some of those things. I look at last year and the way that they didn't quit on Venables and then go and pull that upset. That, you think about surprise teams, like Arizona State was like that 2 years ago, where they're on the road at Washington in November with Cam Scattergo when DeBoer was out there, and that Washington team went to the national title, and they were down in the fourth quarter to Arizona State on.
Oh, ASU should have won that game.
Yeah, and they were running a wildcat type situation, and Dillingham bungled some red zone stuff. So there's got to be a spot in here, right, where there's room for surprise. I think we're all skeptical of LSU, who I see publicly getting a lot of that's going to be the SEC's fourth at-large team or their fourth team to make the playoff. I like Oklahoma, man. I do. And one thing that I can't help but mention is that it has not happened this century that Texas has beaten them 2 years in a row. And Texas beat them last year. Yeah, it's a pretty fascinating trend. But Oklahoma owns that rivalry in modern times in many ways. So
a little like Charlie Strong in that number, though, right?
Yeah, there is, for sure. But it's just Oklahoma is one of those teams that since they've moved to the SEC, all this focus and talk has been on Texas, and for good reason. Obviously, I'm not saying that's wrong, but I am also just let's look what those two teams did in the Big 12. Oklahoma was winning Big 12 titles damn near every year for a long time, and Texas won, I think, one before the final year in the Big 12 in like the 15 years prior or so. I think that Michigan game in week 2 is going to be really fascinating for them, and that Auburn game in week 4 is one that I think you can almost circle and be like, who do you like in terms of, I think if you like one of those teams and feel really strongly that one of those teams is going to beat the other, then that might be the place to be from a win total over perspective.
Yeah, I'm not going to say the name of the team. I said this about another team. But, Robert, it seems, as I said before, if this team does make the playoff, this would be a tough out. It's, okay, if the thing falls into place here, yeah, this is not a team. It's going to be tough on both sides of the ball. Is that a fair assessment, you think, Robert?
Yeah, they've been good on defense, but they have really struggled on offense the last couple of years. I will think we were low on them last year going into the SEC. And they didn't look good for a large stretch of last year. Texas crushed them in Red River. But they turned out, like, at the end of the year, they took down Alabama, basically ending Alabama's shot at the CFP. And now they did lose to LSU in the final week of the season, embarrassingly 37-17. But, again, they've moved on from Jackson Arnold now. They have a better quarterback, probably. They have a better offensive coordinator now. I'm interested to see what this team can do. Week 2 is at Michigan. That's a huge test. Auburn, less of a test, but still a test. I think Sharon Moore is not based on the new suspension. He's not the coach for that game, if I remember correctly.
I believe that's
Because
correct. Yep.
originally he was going to coach this game because he imposed the suspension on himself on week 3 and 4, and now they're doing it, or whatever. He's not. I believe he's currently suspended, but they're appealing the ruling, which is a great way to decide things. Basically, yeah, they may have a Sharon Moore-less Michigan at home, which is not bad. But like Texas, yeah, Red River, that's going to be the big test, right? 100%. Oklahoma has owned Texas in this rivalry. Texas has won their odd one, but again, it's really hard to come back from that Caleb Williams one. Just program from Texas, right? Like when you have that big of a lead and you blow it, that's really hard to swallow, internalize, just move on the next day. That's really tough in that rivalry. Now, obviously, last year they crushed them. I think there's a bit of revenge for the Caleb Williams one from that one too. But this is the thing. It's the fact that we expected them to kind of take a step back as it got to the SEC, but I think towards the end of the year they figured out how to play with the SEC. And I think they have a quarterback who's actually experienced this time. I think they might actually be able to do something. Maybe I take a bit on the over. I think, like, again, they were 10-2, but that was with a Big 12 schedule, and they did lose to Oklahoma State, which cost them dearly that year too. I don't know. We'll have to see. But I think, yeah, maybe give me some Oklahoma here. I wouldn't necessarily mind that.
What would you... Oh, sorry, Graham.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
Go ahead.
What would you make the line? I'm going to say who would be favored. What kind of line would you have in the Oklahoma-Michigan game? Robert.
Me? I actually know. I know what the line is.
Yeah, okay. Like, I don't pay attention to these things, so I asked the wrong guy.
Okay. I think it should be I think it should be like a touchdown, but yeah.
Yeah, I'd probably go more than that. I'd probably go like 6. And this is where it's probably a betting opportunity.
Interesting.
What do you put that as, Graham?
So here's my thing with Oklahoma, that we've been sitting here talking about the offense, right? But I just look at a lot of these SEC games, right? And like they often come down to the trenches, like we were talking about with Ole Miss a minute ago. And Oklahoma's defensive tackles were quietly maybe the best like group of DTs in the SEC last year, and they bring I think four of the 5 back that they played decent amount of snaps last year, and then I have questions a little bit. Like they brought in Marvin Jones from Florida State, who was at Georgia before Florida State, and has never really figured out how to play the run. So that makes me a little concerned about just some of their off-tackle run defense stuff. But my point in saying all that is to say that you look at their offense last year, they were like not just a bad offense. They were like 120s in certain categories. They were terrible. And so the defense was okay. And the thing that they struggled with the most was in the secondary. But like you look at how they had some injuries there that I think hurt them. You look at Venables and his history and how they recruited. I think they'll figure that out. It's pretty easy to find decent secondary play if you know how to organize it in college football. So I go to the spot with them where I think that defense will keep them in a lot of games. And if that offense is just okay, like this is probably an 8-win team, right? But that Michigan game, getting them in Norman and then just I think having a little bit of build up all offseason to that is big for them. I would, with Michigan having that's the reason I brought up the tackles to begin with, though, is just Michigan with the new quarterback thing, and I think being pretty run dependent early in the season as they figure their QB situation out. Like I'd lean Oklahoma more than a field goal, like probably more in that 5.5 type range.
Yeah, I was coming at about 6. If you're gonna make me bet Michigan, I would want 10.5. That's my starting point there, and I can give up the 4.5, split those, and I'm at about 5 or 6 or so.
It's Oklahoma minus 2.5.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So that's a pick 'em basically in Vegas's eyes.
This is at Oklahoma.
After Oklahoma blows up Illinois State, I think that I'm joking. You did say something. I thought we were going to keep it nice here, but you said something that was opaquely. I think your words were, "If you can just get it organized, it's not hard to find good defensive back play."
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a shot at my school, and I don't appreciate that, sir.
It wasn't.
I'm joking. I'm kidding.
That's
All
funny.
in good fun.
That's funny.
Okay. South Carolina. Electric Lenora Sellers. 117 Apex in his first year starting. An Apex Plus, meaning once we adjust that for strength of opponent, 146. That is really solid territory. This team was very good running the ball. 21st in opponent-adjusted run offense. Offensive line starters include 2 transfers. Not troubling, but you're just a cut below like your Georgias and Alabamas. I don't know what to make of this. I thought Mike Shula is probably like just on the golf course now. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. That's the SEC thing. You're at the lake. I don't know what to make of that. But let's be honest. It's not like there's been awesome offensive coordinators under Beamer there before. But still, they've managed to somehow find a way to get it done relatively. Really good defense here. 5th in Apex Plus. So 5th basically in pass defense. 4th in run defense, and 2nd in overall. Now, they're a little light on returning talent here. They do avoid Georgia and Texas. They get Alabama at home, and Oklahoma at home too. So the schedule's kind to them. The season win total is 7.5, and the under is getting crushed. I think this team is undervalued. Am I missing something here, or is this? It seems like the old SEC at large is just unconvinced about this program. Are they seeing that this is a lucky team? You're closer to the storylines than we are, Graham. What's the scoop on this one?
I think that you look at South Carolina, that defensive line last year was fantastic. It was dominant in many ways. And yes, you have Dylan Stewart, who's a young player, and he's an edge rusher, so he sacks the quarterback, and people know his name because of that. And he's back. But they lost a lot on that defensive line, and a lot of those guys they had developed them for 3, 4, 5 years. I just think that there's a little bit of a skepticism of South Carolina doesn't recruit high school well enough to be signing a bunch of good DLs. And the flip side to that is that Mike Shula was the offensive coordinator for Cam Newton with the Panthers during his MVP season when they went to the Super Bowl. You look at that skill set that Cam Newton had, Lenora Sellers can do a lot of those things. I'm excited to see what Shula does with them. I think that offensively they can be better, but I think defensively it's hard to not see them taking a step back, and I think that's probably the hesitation in the market.
Boy, but okay, that's a big step back. I don't know, Robert. We had some fun when they found a way to lose that game to LSU, which was just...
That was brutal.
A comedy of not even errors, just a comedy of tragedies. I don't know. That was a rough one, but... I don't know. Are you going to go with the Yankee or the Southerner here in terms of the take on the SEC team here?
Yeah, I do South Carolina. I think this is going to be a team that I like. I don't know if I like them to make the CFP, though. I think a lot of things need to go right for them to be able to do that. You'd have to beat LSU, and you got Oklahoma, and you got Alabama, and Texas A&M. I mean, that's 4 games. Actually, sorry, 3 games, and then the week after. 4 of those tough weeks in 5 weeks. Oh, you got to bye there before Texas A&M, so it's not as bad. But again, and you play Virginia Tech, and you throw in Clemson there for good measure. If they can go 10-2, they should make the CFP. I think they probably are undervalued. I think if they can get past. If they can figure out what went wrong against LSU and actually beat LSU this year and actually become a dominant team, if you can get through LSU and then you can only lose one of Oklahoma, Alabama, and Texas A&M, then yeah, okay, you go to the playoffs. I just don't know about that. That being said, though, 7.5 is not the line to get into the playoffs. That is 9.5, not 7.5. So I think you take the over here. But that's the thing. Lenora Sellers is actually a very good quarterback. And in the event of Archie Manning not going to the NFL, which I think we're going to talk about in a few more schools, but we're almost at T. But I think he could be a sneaky candidate for a top NFL quarterback. Like, he's a good prospect. He's just a good overall quarterback and doesn't have the same flaws as a Nussmeier or a Cade Klubnik or potentially even a True Aller in some cases. So
he's got a huge ceiling. physically.
Yeah, he's a sneakily good pick for an NFL team. And again, this quarterback class, again, it's not an NFL podcast, but again, this will be an absolutely loaded quarterback class for the NFL. Yeah.
My take on Sellers is if the Colts can convince themselves to pick Anthony Richardson 5th overall, I don't see why Sellers can't be a 1st overall pick. I really don't.
The difference is Sellers can throw the ball.
Correct.
I was yeah.
Yeah. Precisely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Easy.
Yeah.
Sorry, Robert. That was mean. That was your guy AR. But okay.
Not ours anymore.
All right, Tennessee. Look, when we were talking about coaches before the season, we had Heupel in the discussion to make a jump to an excellent coach. He's not had a bad season, like, at all, as a head coach. So I believe in Josh Heupel. I think we're stretching the limits here, guys. Your new quarterback had an 88 apex at App State, and oh, by the way, he wasn't in for spring. I know we have a good coach and quarterback friendly and this and that. There's kind of laws of physics when it applies to this game, and you're brushing up against it here. They're last in the entire conference in 25 Ryan. They didn't add anything to the portal, which is surprising. I wouldn't know recruiting well enough, and I'll maybe ask you about that in a bit, Graham, but I don't know what they have that they didn't try out last year, but I hope they have a lot, because otherwise it could get a little tricky here in terms of the passing game. 2 transfers and a true freshman among the offensive line starters, that's a concern too. This team, the strength of this team was defense and running game last year. They actually should be, only Vandy has a higher returning starts. PYLC is prior year learning curve, that's the improvement metric. So they should be better on defense. 8.5, the under's taking some money, it's reasonable. Look, there's pieces to like here, but man, you're just asking a lot in terms of just on the offense here. Again, you're close to this conference, or I guess you know it better than we do. Do they have a lot of recruits that are in the wide receiver room that just nobody's heard of yet, Graham?
No, they don't. And I think the problem for them is that the thing with this Heupel offense is it's similar to the Bryles system at Baylor and some of these kind of blur, like tempo offenses. And I credit him. Last year's Tennessee team, fun stat for you, they were 100 yards off of running for more team rushing yards than any team in Tennessee history. They were second to the 1951 Tennessee Volunteers. So, like, he put 2 tight ends on the field and physicaled it around, and he had a really good offensive line that was very veteran-laden that turns over now. But the rep is out on the system for skill players being – hey, as a quarterback, this doesn't really get you ready for the NFL. There's people who believe that might be why Nico was firm on, I'm going to get money or I'm going to go because I'm going to cost myself money on the back end. Receiving, you look at Jalen Hyatt, won a Biletnikoff Award for Tennessee in 2021. Can't get on the field with the New York Giants. I think that there's some of these things that are starting to stack up on them in the recruiting trail, these narratives that are fair or unfair have hurt them in their talent acquisition. And they've got a kid named Mike Matthews who he's an Atlanta area guy, and I saw him play a good bit in high school, and he was a 2-way high school player. He's very talented, and if he hits, I think he hits in a major way for them and can be a vertical threat. But I just don't know. In the SEC, like, eventually you've got to be able to do something besides chuck and run. And I had hopes that Nico was going to create that over time, just with his physical ceiling. I don't think this is going to be the year that happens.
Let me ask you this then: How did Mr. Matthews do from a chemistry standpoint with Joey Aguilar in the spring? Oh, that's right, he wasn't there in the spring. We're overlooking this, right? Am I the only one? Am I like the boy who cried wolf here?
Well, Tennessee fans are like, they've been melting down on the message boards for a couple weeks now because they're not even sure Aguilar is starter caliber. Like, and maybe that's a good thing for Tennessee, honestly. If they go to one of the younger guys, like they've got Merklinger and some other kid, I forget his name, who's from Nashville area, but it's interesting because there seems to be a strong core culturally for them that pushed Nico out, that is set firm boundaries with Boo Carter, that whole situation that's gone on with their star defender there. But like, you lose James Pierce, who was a first-round pick, very talented. You lose a lot of guys on the offensive line that have basically been there since Heupel was there. I think topped out in 2024 with that playoff appearance. And if you'd had a better quarterback, then maybe you could have turned that into a playoff win or something. But I just don't see it for this particular Tennessee team.
Yeah. I did out myself as, I guess, a fellow kook. I would treat this as a year 0 or year 1. So what is Aguilar going to do for you? He's a senior, I believe.
Yeah, he's a fifth year.
Why invest it to what end? Go young.
Yeah.
It's not their season. Really nice 24. It's not happening this year. Now, Robert, you can set me straight and say, oh, yeah, but how you like this? They're going to the playoff.
App State and Joey Aguilar did struggle a bit last year, but the year before that, he did actually have a pretty half-decent year.
Yep.
I'm not, again, the win total here is 8.5. I don't want to bury Tennessee quite yet. I think with a lot of SEC teams, there are SEC teams where it's like, hey, you give me 7.5 points or 14 if it's the top ones, I'll always consider them. And then I think that's Tennessee. Like, if they're playing Alabama and it's like 14.5, I'd consider that. 7.5 at Florida, sure, let's talk. So this is where I think some teams have value plays, and Tennessee is definitely potentially one of those. So again, it is going to be a bit of rebuilding year. He's been pretty good here, though. Honestly, Josh Heupel has been really good. I think this is going to be a good team. It's maybe you can see that pattern too, like 11-2 in 22, then 9-4 in 23, then 10-3 last year, losing in the playoff. This year, I guess, would be a bit of a regression, but hey, you recruit good this year, we'll be talking about you in 25. So I think this is going to be like a sneakily good spot. Like, they're probably going to knock off someone, probably, I want to say Florida, or I'm not sure who's going to be the favorite in that game. But they'll knock off someone, and then that will be the upset. Maybe Georgia, maybe Alabama, maybe Oklahoma even, right? Like, if they lose every single game against the better teams, I think I'd be a bit surprised by that. But they'll find their niche, and they'll take down someone, but they're not going to be I don't think they're going to make the playoffs this year.
I think one thing that is interesting is they've actually had Alabama's number a little bit after losing to them for 15 years in a row. And you look at the way that schedule sets up, I think that's a danger spot. Neyland Stadium is as powerful as any home field advantage in college football. Georgia goes up there, first true road game for a new starting quarterback with a young defense. Like, some weird stuff can happen, and you have a bad turnover or two. All of a sudden, you get down 10 points. Like, that can snowball on teams. It does snowball on teams up there a lot. So the schedule sets up well for them in the beginning. I don't think Fran Brown is going to have the same level of oomph as he did last year. So assuming they win that game, do they get to Alabama? What, 1, 2, 3, 5-1? And then if you're 5-1 and you're feeling good about yourself, like all of a sudden, like momentum is, and just feeling good can go a long way in college football. It really can. And so that side of it is where I have pause, because to Robert's point, like, I think they'll beat Mississippi State. They should beat Arkansas. They should beat Kentucky. They'll beat New Mexico State. So all of a sudden that's 1, 2, 3, 4. They'll beat UAB. That's 5. East Tennessee State. Syracuse is 7 if they run into the right day against Alabama or Georgia. Maybe Oklahoma. There's maybe enough variance there, especially getting them in Knoxville. Like, it wouldn't shock me for them to stumble into an over here, but I just trusted them to win those kind of borderline games a lot more when they could run the football the way that they did. And it's hard to imagine them not taking a step back when you lose a back like they had and an offensive line like they had.
That's interesting, too, about the recruiting, the negative recruiting against Tennessee. Maybe I have to get used to that. That didn't happen in the Pac-12. Everybody's just happy we all held hands out here. Probably not the same in the Big Ten, but definitely different kind of character than SEC recruiting for sure.
Absolutely.
All right, the Texas Longhorns.
Here we go.
I had them as a rated number 1 team last year. I had them as the top defense in all of college football. Arch Manning had a 171 apex. Brilliant. Let's just normalize that a little bit, please, boys and girls. That was against UTSA, who was 119th in passing defense in all of FBS. My Warhawks of ULM, who had an 82 defensive apex plus, so that's 47th. And lowly, man, Mississippi State had a bad defense last year. They were almost 100th in FBS. So,
and he didn't play that well against them, just for the record.
I'm not going to argue with the 171 apex. I'm just saying, let's just hold on here, guys. Again, this is another quarterback that's driving me nuts here in terms of the Heisman hype I'm getting here. He could be great, but I said he could, not will be. The offensive line is really light on starts. No surprise you have an elite recruiter in Sark and a very moneyed program. They have no transfers on the starting offensive line. A really good sign. They add this Jack Endry's a tight end from Cal and Emmett Mosley from Stanford. Nice numbers, okay. Probably my question about this team is the wide receiver or just the receiving in general here. My guy, Jeremy, shout out from Equinox, Longhorn alum. He's given me 10 names to say don't worry about it. And I know Sark recruits receivers, but we'll see about that. This is the best defense in all of FBS, and it should be elite again. They have no home games in October, which is crazy. I don't know how that happens. Season win total is 9.5. The over is getting absolutely crushed. I think they're reasonably valued. I'll probably have them favored in probably every. Yeah, if I had to do right now, I don't know what I would make the line on the Georgia game. I don't know who I would have favored. That's a tough one, but we have a long time to figure it out. Here's my real... Robert, you've heard this speech enough, so I'll just give Graham the fresh version here. Steve Sarkisian, former quarterback, offensive coordinator and on. I get really concerned when that guy is relying on his defense to win games.
Okay.
That's that and just his... this is an indictment here, but he's got a track record that isn't great in close games too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Say more. Do you mind saying a little bit more about the? I understand he's an offensive coach, and you say that guy's relying on his defense to win games, but like, why? Just, I feel like there's more there that I'd like to hear about your opinions on Sark.
I'll put it this way. Let's frame it again because it's all about me and my reference and my school.
Sure.
I wasn't a big fan of the 2005 USC team because that was by far Pete Carroll's worst defense.
Okay. And
I never had a good feeling about that team. And everybody was saying it was going to be the best team ever, and I could tell it wasn't even going to be his best team because that defense stunk. If the coach's side of the ball, if you will, is the weak point, relatively, I have a problem with that. I'm just wondering about what do we really have here in the head coach? Nick Saban never had bad DBs, and he was a DB coach. Let's just use that as a starting point.
Good point.
If you just start there and build out, I really wonder about him as a head coach that way. He is beyond reproach as a recruiter.
I don't think he is, to be honest with you.
As a recruiter?
As a recruiter, as someone who travels the recruiting circuit in the SEC,
yes,
I will tell you exactly what Texas has done on the trail. And it is quite brilliant in a lot of ways because perception becomes reality, as we have seen very much with your preseason number one ranked Texas Longhorns. But Sark goes to SEC Media Days, and he says all the right stuff, right? Relationship. Kirby had just been up on the podium a couple hours earlier talking relationships over transaction. Sark comes up, says the same thing in a different way. And then he goes and pays a linebacker who is a five-star kid on paper, but they're maybe not all, probably shouldn't be on the top of anyone's linebacker board just for certain reasons, not off-field stuff. I just mean with his game. And they go and offer that kid about 3 times more than anybody else is willing to pay him.
Okay.
And so
Gotcha.
And he's a 5-star, and so everyone's look at Sark putting Ohio State and Georgia into a locker because that's how Twitter reacts to shit. But at the end of the day, if you're really that good of a recruiter, then why do you have to pay all these kids more than anyone else is willing to pay them to get them to come there? That's my question. And that keeps happening for Texas. I'm not just talking about single instances. They have done a smart job of picking guys that are highly rated that will move the needle enough publicly and draw enough attention to create a world where people believe that they are elite recruiters. But they're very much – I have questions like, are you trending towards a stars and scrubs type roster if we actually go to a world where there's some sort of limitations on exactly how the money stuff can work? I don't know if that's going to happen, though.
Yeah, you make a good point, and I guess I just took it for granted. If you talk about recruiting in a corporate sense, Recruiting is about identifying, attracting, and getting them to sign. And I just take the identified for granted here. Sure. At USC, it's just get the guys that you can. In the state of California, you're good, and bring in a couple of bigger guys from outside the state, and that's how success is here. You make a good point, and it's a lot more of I think it's probably a lot more of a consideration in the SEC, where everybody recruits. Any kind of advantage or disadvantage is probably magnified a lot in that regard. Really good thing. Also, a good point. You didn't mention the Lamborghinis too, which are really funny considering that you said we don't guys are here for the money.
Yeah.
Which is just
I had a semi-viral post on Twitter last offseason because Sark did a sit-down with Joel Klatt, and he said all those things. And I shared a video that a recruit had posted like 4 days earlier of walking into the Texas facility with "They Not Like Us" blaring, and there's Lambos and Porsches and shit on either side of the sidewalk, and Sark standing in the door waving, "Come on, guys, welcome in." And I do look at what happened to Georgia last year culturally, and I do wonder, is Texas immune to that, or does this catch up with them at some point? Because guys that were there, like Ewers and some of these guys that just left, Ewers committed to a 5-7 program. He wanted to be at Texas because Texas was home for him. And these guys now are committing to a program that has achieved a lot in the last few years, and that also is offering them the most money. And just, I have questions about how that works in the long haul. And this year I have questions about this year as well.
That's why it's so hard to three-peat. I mean, you and I both saw it up close. It's just by the time you're on that three-peat part, you're in the second wave, and the guys didn't have to have that hunger or work or understand the work that goes into it.
The climb, And
so, congratulations for Texas for maybe being there without getting the national championship this time around. Tough break for you guys.
Well, if you listen to The Athletic, they're the new Alabama.
Okay, noted.
Awesome.
Yes. No, please go ahead.
I do have a little bit of a dossier on Texas here because this has been a bone I've had to pick for this offseason a lot. I think their defense that defense last year was nasty. I thought it was the best defensive line I saw in person, other than maybe them and Ole Miss were right there on the defensive line, but the entirety of Texas' defense was awesome. And the back end, losing Barron and Makuba, I think even if they've got good players moving in, like those guys had a level of just kind of moxie and comfort on the field that can be tough to replace. But the center of the D line, you're going to the portal and relying on 3 transfer defensive tackles. And even the reserve guy for them, Bill Norton, who was like a situational run stopper, was watching the Rams game last night, and he's batting down passes, and he's playing a bunch of snaps in the NFL as an undrafted free agent already. So I think people might be underestimating the talent drop-off there on the DL a little bit. With Arch, right? I think we've got this idea, or there's this, not we, but there is a public perception that Ewers was the problem, and now the problem is solved. And everyone talks about Ewers. The pass game was hot dog water for Texas. The run game was great. But you look at this, let's be straight. They were 27th out of 68 P4 teams in rush offense last year, and they were 7th out of 68 P4 teams in pass offense, opponent adjusted. So, Ewers was pretty okay in a lot of ways. I thought he was a pretty good quarterback. And by the way, he played with a torn open abdomen muscle for most of the year. I think there's a lot of excitement about Arch's mobility, and that's fair if you watch the clip of him running through the back seven of UTSA. But his pressure to sack ratio, Ewers had a pressure to sack ratio of 26.8%. 26% of the time that he was pressured ended in a sack. Manning's against UTSA, Mississippi State, and the other limited snaps he played, 31.8%. I've got questions about how well this dude actually sees the field. There have been 2 SEC quarterbacks in the last decade to face at least 15 total pressures in a season, so not that many, and be responsible for more than half of them, not have an offensive line responsibility, as in this guy ran himself into pressure. One of them was Arch Manning last season. The other was Lynn Bowden, who was the Kentucky running back wide receiver that played quarterback due to injury. So I'm just very curious. And I see all the – I get into his last name's Manning. I'm sure there's somebody that's going to teach him how to do all this stuff. But I just am not, even on tape, when when I try to evaluate, like, I don't see a guy who sees the field super well. I see a guy who had really good wide receivers against inferior opponents last year and was able to sit on his first read and throw a deep ball when it got open. And God, does he throw a gorgeous deep ball. I would never take that away from him, but if you got all this receiver production that you're losing and you might have to turn it over and your first man's not open all the time, can this snowball on him in Texas as soon as week one? I've already hit some alt line Ohio State in week one. That's how strongly I feel about this.
Interesting. I want to point out too, that's a Sark special, is really getting a lot of empty calorie numbers against just overmatched teams too.
Yeah. A lot of behind the line of scrimmage passes to pad stats and all that. But if you really dig into the higher level throws, the other thing that freaks me out on Arch is the sacks that he did take last year. He had the longest average time between snap and sack of any quarterback in the SEC.
Really?
So he had a long time to figure out, do I run this? Do I throw it away? And he just freezing up a little bit.
That's the kind of thing I think he can grow out of, though.
Sure, absolutely.
I would expect that, but some of those other things are concerning.
I'm just curious if maybe we're a year early here on Texas.
Yeah. Now,
like winning a title.
Yeah, exactly. Robert, this is not two Americans ganging up on a Canadian here, but there's no way you're going to disagree about the Arch consensus on this pod?
No, definitely not. I will say that I think there are very strong structural forces that if Archie Manning looks good, he will win the Heisman. I think midway through the season, that if he does struggle a little bit, there'll probably be value to be seen on some other player. But if they were to beat Ohio State, and maybe they blow it up against Oklahoma or something, or maybe they beat Oklahoma and then they lose to Kentucky, because that's exactly what would happen, then maybe there's an opening for someone else. But again, that if they beat Ohio State, Archie Manning is like, what, plus 150 to win the Heisman? That's, I think, the concern in terms of the Heisman betting. I bet Archie Manning to win the Heisman. I've said this before on this podcast. I've bet him to win the Heisman, but I have not bet Texas to win the SEC. I think those are two very different bets. Because while Sarkisian can definitely cost him an SEC championship, he might not be able to cost Archie Manning a Heisman trophy. And I think that's the thing here. I do not 100% believe in this Texas team. I'm not buying Ohio State that much this year. I don't like their coordinator hires. Maybe they're okay, maybe. But I don't know. Like, this Texas defense is really good. And you're going to have Archie Manning versus Matt Patricia's defense. That's concerning. I think he did come in and he did play a bit last year. Maybe it's the feels, and maybe the feels aren't correct in terms of the stats. But when he came in those games, it felt like he gave Texas something. Now, not against Georgia when he was playing against Georgia. He basically did as well as Ewers did against Georgia. But he felt like he gave them some extra juice, and I feel like had he been in there in that SEC championship game, I feel like Texas would have won the SEC championship game. Now, I could be wrong on that. Maybe the stats don't back me down. But like I felt, especially in the back half, when they lost it by 3? Like when Gunnar Stockton was in there, you're saying that if that had been Archie Manning in the back half of the fourth quarter or in overtime, that wouldn't. I don't know. Would have helped.
The mobility, but here's my concern or my question maybe is just to play devil's advocate here. Why, for him as a passer, he had some mop-up duty against Florida. He had some of those snaps that he played for Ewers against Georgia, where he dropped back 9 times and only threw 6 passes. But he didn't throw a pass in all these games that we're talking about that he brought juice to. He ran in a touchdown against Texas A&M, and he did some of those things. But from after that start in week 5 against Mississippi State, he had 9 pass plays called for him against Georgia. He had 6 against Florida and 1 against Clemson he didn't throw a pass in that scenario. So I just think, and he was a 50% passer for 38 yards on 12 attempts in those throws after that Mississippi State game. I just think that there was we saw him a lot but he was like a Tebow at 08 or 06 Florida. That's what he was down the stretch for Texas. He was a short yardage kind of situational player and red zone situational running threat. But if he is as good as everyone says, why wasn't he trusted to throw the football? And I can't square that. If he was as good as everyone says he's going to be, why did he sit behind an injured 7th-round pick? Why did they rush back Quinn Ewers with a torn core muscle to play against Kentucky, I think it was, when they could have started Arch another week and let Ewers get healthy? That is the thing that I just keep coming back on. And people are like, oh, that's what the family wanted. But Peyton was a starter early on, second game of his career. You know what I mean? I have that question, and that's mine.
It is. Yeah, I will say that does give me. I struggled to wrap my head around that one too, and I think maybe we'll have our answer after the Ohio State game, right? If Ohio State blows up Texas, we have our answer to that, right? But if it's the other way, then I think you have to, because I think you can interpret the answer to that as a couple of ways. Either one, okay, yeah, he's not as good as yours. And again, Sark, we don't see that. We don't see every practice. We're not talking to him. So Sark would have seen this. So Sark would have been like, yeah, no, Ewers is our guy. He's better. I trust him more in these high-pressure situations, so we got to get him back there against Kentucky. The alternative answer is that they felt they owed it to Ewers, or Ewers wanted to get back, or Archie Manning said, you know what, fine, this isn't my year, but let him. We don't know, and it's impossible to know. You can speculate on that both ways. That's the thing, and that's the thing. And it really does. That's where, with the bets, it is concerning on that. And again, I think the upside to Manning is he wins the Heisman. The downside is Texas goes, 8-4? I think that's where you could sit on this, right? And I think I like betting Manning to win the Heisman, and that's about it. I think Texas versus Oklahoma, that's going to be a great game. At Florida should be fun too. They get Georgia. Other than that, not the hard, and Texas A&M obviously. But outside of that, and Ohio State, I really want to watch that Texas Ohio State game on Saturday at noon. But this is the thing. I think that I see a path where Archie Manning is good enough that he wins the Heisman. But I don't see a path where, what SEC coach would have to be in the SEC championship game for you to say, Sark is a better coach than him? What coach? He's not better than DeBoer. He's not better than Kirby Smart. He's probably not even better than Shane Beamer. Who's the opposing coach where you're like, Brian Kelly, Billy Napier? What's the coach where you're like, yeah, okay, Sark's better than him? I'm just throwing out names. So which coach? What's the coach?
Gotta go deep. This is a deep conference.
I mean,
that's the thing, and that's the crazy part about this, right? And it gets back to what we were saying before, where it's like he's the offensive coordinator, and yes, he got this job because he was the offensive coordinator for Bama in a year in which they had 3 first-round draft picks on their team and crushed everyone and had one of the best offenses ever in college football. And because of that, Texas hired him, and the next year they lost to Kansas. That is why he got this job. And that's the thing. And the problem is that they have recruited. They've been an absolute beast at recruiting. And yeah, that's because they've been paying people 3 times more than the other schools will pay them. But guess what? They're still playing free. That's the thing.
For sure.
And that's the point you were making too, is the fact that, yeah, okay, is it the best way to do this? Is it that you're ensuring that it's guys who are here for the love of Texas, for the love of the state, the love of orange, the love of the game? No. But if your wide receiver's taller than that deep backs, it doesn't really matter that much, right? If your guys are just 50 pounds heavier than their guys on the O-line and on the D-line, doesn't really matter that much. Now, again, the second it gets competitive, cough, SEC championship game, that's when they have a problem. So,
no doubt. And I think I totally agree with your take on just the media. Heisman is a media voted award. The media loves the Arch storyline. I actually don't hate the concept of taking some Arch for Heisman and then almost hedging that with, you can get plus 240 for Texas to miss the playoff entirely. Because I do see a world where even if they're 9-3 and they make the playoff, the Arch love could just be heavy enough to where he wins the Heisman, even if he hasn't really had that great of a year. That could actually be a fun bookend for the Arch phenomenon.
Yeah.
That's a good idea, actually, yeah.
I like that. All right. Their rival, the Texas A&M Aggies. Second season under Mike Elko. Let's just put this on for size, guys. Marcel Reed had a better apex in his first year starting than Garrett Nutzmeyer, okay?
No way.
Yet another one here. Yeah. We have an experienced offensive line. They were third in the SEC in run offense. The defense was pretty good before Elko came on. He improved them a couple of points. They have a very... crap. I got a graphic wrong here, but they have a very high improvement metric here. The conference schedule is pretty kind here. Auburn, Mississippi State, Florida, Arkansas, LSU, Missouri. I don't see an Alabama. I don't see a Georgia. Season win total is 8.5 with the under taking a bunch of money. If I look at that schedule, that doesn't make sense to me. They're undervalued. I can't bet on that out of principle, and we'll get to that in a little bit later. Robert, I'm going to throw it to you this time with just the question. Was Mike Elko a better hire here, or was Deshaun Foster a better hire at UCLA?
Yeah, I think clearly Mike Elko. It was...
Yeah. And just to be clear, this is because Stuart Mandel said he rated the Sean Foster hire above Mike Elko.
Wow.
Yeah.
Graham, you were confused by that.
I was like, he's the California guy. So
USC guy. What does he know? Sorry, Robert, go ahead.
Yeah, no, this isn't even like Stuart Mandel catching strays. It's just like us aiming deliberately at Stuart Mandel and firing. Again, we loved the Mike Elko hire. We loved him at Duke. We said, hey, this is great. And he went at Texas A&M, and there was a couple weeks there where Texas A&M could make the playoff there, and that's insane. When we go from like a Jimbo Fisher team where we're like, this is a joke, to hey, this team can make the playoffs for any amount of time there, that's an insane turnaround in just 1 year. And that's with a quarterback who I wasn't particularly even impressed with. Again, your schedule, okay, you've got at Notre Dame, but you've got Auburn, you got Florida, you got LSU. You have Texas, yeah, but you miss Georgia, you miss Alabama, you have South Carolina. Like, South Carolina and Texas are your two toughest. If you can get past Notre Dame, that's a 10-2. You're probably going to the playoffs, right? That is not bad at all. I think the 8.5 is a bit low, and it's just let Mike Elko do his thing. He was amazing at Duke, and now you've given him a ton of resources. And in 1 year, he already turned the ship around. They went 7-6 to 8-5. Doesn't seem like the biggest transformation, but it is clearly like in terms of how they got those wins. So we like Mike Elko. Yeah, 8.5 under 180. You can easily see a 9-win season. You can even see a lot of paths to a 10-win season here. So yeah, I'd like 9-3 is very easy. 10-2 is easy as well, and maybe even 11-1. Like it's a very doable here. Way to get to Texas A&M in even the SEC championship game, really. I mean, if you can get assuming you can get past Notre Dame, but that doesn't count for your conference. Okay, you've got Florida.
You could get to the weird tiebreaker thing, I think, right?
Yeah, which is weird. But you've got like Florida and then at LSU, which isn't fun. But like South Carolina will be pretty beat up by that point. Again, this is this weird thing where like Texas A&M avoids anybody who's even remotely good until the last 3 weeks. And then you got Samford, and then you have Texas. There's a scenario here where like Texas A&M play 2 straight weeks, and that'd be fun to see. Mike Elko, great hire. Yeah, 8.5 under minus 180. That's insane. I think you're gonna be plus 150 to basically lose to only Notre Dame, South Carolina, and Texas. That's kind of nuts.
Yeah. So Graham, I think this would be a play. Literally, I would give a lot of consideration to playing them, were it not for the fact that this program is like the person you hope doesn't show up at the cocktail party because they're going to bore you to death. The program, we could do 4 hours on it, on just how weird it is, and I just philosophically can't bet on them. But other than that, what's not to like here? Yeah. Other than the fact that it's Texas A&M.
But I think that Elko has all the stuff that Sark says about Texas in terms of the value and like how they want to run things and like what they want. I think Elko actually does all those things.
Yeah.
Genuinely. And that's a compliment and a credit to him. Look, guys like Elko, I see this all the time. Defensive head coaches, they get put in this box of they don't understand offense or they're in the way of offense. But you look at the most successful coaches are just the guys that are winning national titles in college football. Like, it's the Kirbys and the Sabans and these kinds of more boring type of hires.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that A&M's about to go win a national title, but I do think they're a little undervalued just because they're not that interesting in a lot of ways. And last year they had the inside track to be in the SEC championship game, and things fell apart at the end. But they ran the football and they played defense. I think they'll play defense again. Very intrigued by Jacob Zeno, who was quietly brought in from UAB this offseason as a transfer quarterback. He is mobile in the way that Reed is, so you would not be changing your offensive system if you brought him in the game.
Yeah.
But I saw him when he was at UAB in 2023 when they had the guy, Alex Mortensen was their OC, Chris Mortensen's son.
I was going to say, yes.
And
Are you saying he'd get better coaching at A&M than under Alex Mortensen?
No, I'm saying Alex Mortensen left, and then last year at UAB, I'm not sure if Zeno was hurt or what, but he only threw for 800 yards or so. I don't think he started for them all year and then slipped out. But 2023 Zeno was really good. He threw for 300 yards on a Georgia defense that was legit. So I'm curious if they can get, whether it's Marcel Reed or Zeno, like if they can just get something in the passing game besides deep balls and QB run. I think they can be pretty complete as a team on both sides of the football, and I'm high on them. I am. I think that I think that Florida game's going to be a big swing for them, but right now, just knowing what I know, I like them to go and beat Notre Dame probably.
Wow.
I do. Yeah, I think that they match up well with Notre Dame just because of the quarterback situation at Notre Dame kind of being a little like people do not understand how hard Riley Leonard was to sack. His sack avoidance ability was like historically good. And I think that when you talk about they played a really close game last year and they did it with Wegman at quarterback, and that A&M team was much better with a mobile quarterback like Reed. So I just think that they'll do the A&M thing and they might beat Notre Dame and everyone will get excited, and then I could see them losing to Auburn or Florida, but I don't think 9-3 is an unreasonable situation here, and I think that they'll quietly go about it in a way, as quietly as A&M can do anything. Yeah, I like it. I do.
You make a good point, too, about people think that defensive coordinators or guys like, head coaches that used to be DCs are guys like Rex Ryan and Will Muschamp, who are just loose cannons, and he went to Penn. This guy went to Penn. He's a smart guy.
Yeah, he's a really smart guy. And I just think he's a real football coach, if that makes any sense. And you gotta have the CEO skills today in college football as well. But we've talked a lot on this pod about just the variance of this NIL era and not knowing exactly who's going to get what out of their rosters. And if you're talking about guys who I trust to get the most out of their roster, he is on that list. Yep.
Yeah. Fair statement. All right, this is the last one we're going to do in depth. Then we have just a handful that we're going to do in a little more rapid-fire fashion. And I'm so glad we have an SEC footprint guy here. Vanderbilt. What a fascinating season. Tim Beck comes in as offensive coordinator. The offensive rating improves 11 points in one season. That is crazy. Diego Pavia returns as the most experienced quarterback in the SEC. This was not an explosive offense in the ground, nor the air. And yet they just had that way of playing that pain in the ass. God, we can't stop. It was almost like an Iowa thing. Mm-hmm. Just one of those teams that's like, Jesus, just get them off the field. And you couldn't. The offensive line is a bit of a question mark with 3 transfers coming in. Weird for Vanderbilt. I thought they didn't take in transfers. How about this? The defensive rating, out of nowhere, improves by about 5 points. Let's come back to that in a second, okay? This should be a good defense. It should improve. Now, they're still behind, but you've got all green here in the defensive metrics, so they should take a big step forward this year. They were lucky last year, but not statistically. The season win total is 5.5. The under's getting crushed. I think they're undervalued. Now, why do I think they're undervalued? I had this conspiracy theory I ran through the podcast a few times, and I want to know from an SEC guy. And I don't know where to start with this. There's a quote here from the Phil Steele guide that I've included here. It said, Clark Lee did a phenomenal job in 2024. Did he? Did he? That's my question. Was it Clark Lee? Or was it
Jerry Kill?
a, quote, analyst, yes, who's one of the best coaches ever that nobody appreciates, Jerry Kill.
Yeah.
I think he coached this team. I think Dirk Coder coached Boise State, and I think Jerry Kill coached this team. Let me just finish the thought here. So I'm not worried about the transfers coming in. Jerry Kill overcomes that stuff really quick. I think they're undervalued because Jerry Kill is running this program. Has that surfaced in the SEC footprint, or am I breaking news here?
No, definitely people have talked about, like, Vanderbilt basically just imported New Mexico State's offensive staff and quarterback and Eli Stowers. And head coach. And that tight end, Stowers, he's going to be an NFL day 1, day 2 pick. And honestly, the thing about that offense that I love is it's triple option-esque in a way because it's unique and it's not what you see every day, and it doesn't ask their offensive line to just be stronger and better than the teams they're lining up against. So it's hard to prep for. It's not what you see every week as a defense, and if you slack off on prep, it can bite you on Saturdays. We saw that happen to Bama. It kicked Bama's ass in a sense just in terms of how they ran the football and moved the football on them, and it was not this fluky, like, trick play. It was very sustained and efficient offense is what I'm trying to say. So I like Vandy, man. I do. I think everybody knows that, not everybody, but I think that there is a kind of a wink and a nudge about the whole Jerry Kill thing. Very curious to see how that plays out in the long run because Clark Lee also loves Vanderbilt and is very happy to be there. And also Barton Simmons. Shout out Barton Simmons, the old recruiting analyst for 24/7 who went to high school with Clark Lee and, like, basically built this roster out of kind of finding pieces that were overlooked in some way. He sort of moneyballed Vanderbilt's roster in a way.
That's what you got to do, too, at a school like that, right?
Yeah. And I think that's the cool thing about it is that they're doing all these things the right way. And I also look at last year, I mean, they actually dealt with a lot of injuries as that season went on. And I'm curious, like, how good were they? Could they have actually been if they had just stayed healthy? I'm not saying they're a 10-win team or anything, but I think they could have won 8 maybe.
Yeah. Robert, can our guy Jerry Kill? Can Coach Kill, can he get him to like a 7 or 8 wins, do you think?
First of all, the question is, can they get to a bowl? Because the line is 5.5, and the answer is yeah. This team, they almost took down Texas last year. They actually did take down Alabama. Probably costing Alabama a shot at going to the CFP. They took down Kentucky as 12-point underdogs. They weirdly didn't cover the 27-point spread against Ball State. Lost to Georgia. Up and down.
Yeah, like an embryonic Georgia State program.
Yeah, up and down year, to say the least. But, yeah, so this was a fun team last year. Like, I remember sitting there a lot of Saturdays being like, oh, is it Vanderbilt going to do this, right? And when was the last time you remember a Vanderbilt team ever doing that? So, yeah, 6-6 is very doable here. You've got Alabama, which is not fun, at Texas, which is also not fun, at Tennessee, which is not fun, and South Carolina. Okay, that's 4 games. At Virginia Tech, very winnable game. Georgia State, their arch rivals, apparently. That's a tough one, apparently. LSU, winnable. Again, you almost took down Texas and Alabama last year. I think you could take down LSU, but again, now we're talking about expectations, right? Auburn, Kentucky, Missouri. There are 6 wins on the schedule, right? You could very easily see a path to 6 wins. I think people are trying to pencil in, oh, okay, they were good one year, but Vanderbilt has been horrible. Look, 2020, 0-9, 2021, 2-10, 2022, 5-7. That was and then 2023, 2-10. Right? This is not a particularly great program. This is a perennial basement dweller in the SEC. No one is saying, "Oh man, this program just elite." No one is saying that. Yeah, I like the over 6.5. I think a lot of people are betting the under because they know what Vanderbilt is and they see it's like sticker pricing. But yeah, I'd take the over here for sure.
All right, cool. I'm glad that I'm not just alone on conspiracy.
The only natural question left for us to ask is,
yes,
if Penn State hired Jerry Kill, do you think that they could get over the hump and beat a team that's ranked top 15 in a power rating?
I bet Penn State national championship. Yeah, that'd be enough.
You did?
I don't know if it was Jerry Kill. I did not.
Oh,
no,
okay.
No, don't worry, no. God no. I don't trust. I don't trust them yet. No. If Jerry Kill
James.
was the head coach, yeah, not James Franklin. No. If it was Kill, I 100% bet it. 100%, but not.
That's what they need, the sneaky stealth head coach.
Exactly.
Yep. All right, rest of the SEC. We'll do these just a few sentences on each of them. Arkansas, I like what I saw out of Petrino and Taylor Green. I'm just wondering how much of a step forward. I think we might have seen them get all that they can get out of that duo. Does that feel right to you, Graham?
Yeah, that feels right. They got their wide receivers are spread all over college football and the NFL now. I got a lot of questions. They need to hit on a ton of transfer type stuff, and we already talked about how weak this portal is. I like Sam Pittman a lot, and I want the best for him and all that, but I just think this might be it for him.
The program doesn't understand its place in the universe. That's the thing. Come on, you're Arkansas.
Sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, Robert, anything on Arkansas?
Not particularly, but yeah, I think this might be it, right? That 9-4 season just seems further away every day.
Yeah. Missouri, I don't know what this team's identity is beyond Kirby Moore. That kind of seems like it to me. They actually had a good one-loss record last year. I just didn't notice it because their metrics were really poor by SEC standards. They're just off my grid, and I don't know what they're supposed to be good at this year. Do you have any idea about what the identity is here?
I think Brady Cook was the identity of that program offensively for a really long time. The quarterback who, last year he went to the hospital in the middle of the Auburn game, comes back, leads a 2-touchdown comeback. Like, he had that kind of grit about him. Eli Drinkwitz, I think, is one of the more underrated coaches in the sport right now, to be truthful with you. I do, yeah. I think, he's really creative in the run game, which the run game's hard to be creative in because there's only so many run concepts out there. And he does a good job of tailoring his run game to be difficult, and he coaches some stretch zone stuff very well. I think that you look at their roster and it's like they lose Luther Burden, who was a 5-star recruit that went to Missouri. They lost Theo Weiss, who was a high-level guy that they got out of the portal. Like, they had veteran receivers last year, and that allowed them to do enough on offense. But defensively, they've earned my trust at this point because Blake Baker left and went to LSU after Mizzou had that 11-win – they had an 11-win season and won that Cotton Bowl against Ohio State. And everybody assumed they were going to fall off last year, and they didn't. I think that they're pretty high floor as far as the lower class of the SEC goes. There's usually, I think, value in Missouri on some level, whether it's a game-to-game basis or a total.
Yeah, I will say Eli Drinkwitz, one of the best interviews, it seems like, among the SEC coaches.
Certainly.
What was he saying? Like, when they announced that Texas was coming in, and he had some snarky question for Sankey about, oh man, it was so good. I'm going to look it up and it was fantastic.
2 years ago at SEC Media Days, he filibustered his entire time on the main stage and just talked about his summer and his kids and what they're doing and stuff. And by the time he stopped, there was time for 2 questions, and he got to walk off. And so they set a rule on how long the coach's opening statements could be moving forward.
He gets his own rule.
Yeah, but he's a growth hacker.
Gotcha.
That's what you got to be in Mizzou.
Yep.
You got to find the shortcut.
Yeah. Robert, 10-3 last year. They've earned Graham's trust. Have they earned your trust?
I'm looking through it, and I'm shocked they were 10-3 last year. I'm like, oh, okay. And again, the year before, they beat Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl, I want to say.
Cotton Bowl.
Yes, Cotton Bowl. Whatever bowl, because it existed because of the whatever. But yeah, they beat them in one of the big 6 bowls. But yeah, and then they beat Iowa in the thing. But again, Iowa was like an 8-4 Iowa team, and they narrowly beat them. So again, their record probably was a bit better than they actually were. But again, they had a pretty easy schedule last year, like a 10-3 at 7-9-3. I don't know. I worry about now you're moving on from it was Brady Cook, right? Yeah, you're moving on from Brady Cook. I worry where this program is going to go without Brady Cook. I'm guessing down because he was really keeping this program afloat and pushing them through. This could be Like, without Brady Cook now, this could be where things start breaking. And the schedule it's actually still not that bad. You've got like Alabama and Texas A&M and Oklahoma. So you still and South Carolina. So there's a path to 8-4, but still though, it's not. There's probably going to be clear signs of regression this year. I don't expect them to keep up what they had last year.
I will say their defense they're 10th in the FBS in returning production on defense after having a top 20 scoring defense last year. So it could be stability.
What's interesting too is I think that one of the big differences between Robert and I and Graham is this number right here, significant luck. That's why they just weren't even there. It's not like we were saying, hey, Missouri sucks. They just never got on our radar in terms of, hey, look at this.
Them being like ranked by the CFP committee last year was a joke. I'm with you on all of that, and the way they won that Oklahoma game, like if Brent Venables, if this whole thing fails for him, you can put that game on his tombstone. Like it was that kind of stuff. It was crazy the way that whole thing ended and how Oklahoma beat themselves. So yes, they were certainly a lucky team, no question about that. But I also think that's just. I'd be curious to see what their luck was like the year before, honestly, in 2023, if that's something that, like, is just becoming part of the Drinkwitz thing.
Yeah, we were talking about that about another program. I forget which one, but it was like, it was UAB. Bad luck 2 years in a row. It didn't regress. That's just Trent Dill for everybody.
Yeah, totally. Like, sometimes coaches make their luck a little bit. Not all the way, but a little bit. But yeah, I just think if you look at a 16-team SEC, I know there's only 16 of these jobs, and that they're hard to get, but there's going to be some guys in there that are not smart, and they're not good game managers, and they don't really recognize their place in the league in terms of what we have to do to be competitive and how we got to be different and think about things different. And I think that the Drinkwitz does a really good job of that.
Yeah, agree. All right, you know how you make your good luck? You don't hire Bush Hamdan as your offensive coordinator. Not a fan of Mr. Hamdan and his work at Boise or Kentucky. And now you have Zach Calzada at quarterback. Good luck with that, Mark Stoops. You were thought of very well there. I think you might be chipping away at that reserve of goodwill. Is that how it's going in Kentucky?
Yeah, and I think he also flushed a lot of that goodwill that he had because he tried to leave for Texas A&M in the middle of the night, and then they pulled out of that deal. So I think this is it for him. If it's not, then I mean that man is the nuclear cockroach of coaching, because if you can survive with Zach Calzada, you can survive with anything.
Yeah, the other thing that might work in his favor is that it's a basketball school and they put their money there. I think you almost have the UCLA indifference to a degree, although they don't do things as cheap as UCLA does. So, Robert, does Bush Hamdan turn it around with Zach Calzada now quarterback?
No, this has just been getting progressively worse year after year for Kentucky. Again, they were 10-3 and 21. I believe that was the Will Levis year, if I'm not mistaken. And then since then, they've just been trending down. And yeah, no, I don't have a lot of faith in Zach Calzada. Don't love Bush Hamdan either. I've already bet Toledo with the points and money line for week 1. So yeah, that shows my faith in this program.
There you go. I love it. All right, last team, Mississippi State. I think there's going to be some year 2 improvement under Levy. Last year was a rebuild. The defense still stinks. They've got to turn that around. Very unlucky team, and I think getting a guy like Fluff Blofwell, not easy to say. And you've got a quarterback that you can build with here with Chapin. I like the pieces. I don't know what it means at the end of the day in terms of one loss, but I don't know. If I have my cowbell in my back pocket, I'm a little bit encouraged about where this is going. Is that fair, Graham?
I think so. I feel you're talking about one of these teams that gets picked clean every December by the upper half of the SEC in terms of transfer. That Van Buren kid that played quarterback for them last year really had a lot of tools and could do some great things, and now he's going to go sit on the bench at LSU for a year and wait. That sucks. But yeah, I think Levy is. We talked about these lower programs. You need a guy who's going to run an unconventional offense and try to find some ways, and he's got some of that hype to him. So for sure, I'm behind it.
Yeah. Robert, you seeing just some kind of step forward here for Mississippi State?
I think something. Again, it's hard to do worse than the 3-10 last year. You have Alcorn State on the schedule, You have an FCS team on the schedule. You have Arkansas. You have some teams that you can beat. So this is difficult. This has been basically the basement of the SEC West for many years. They thought they might be free of that, but no, they're right back into it again. After the Mike Leach stuff, this is going to take a while to rebuild. I don't know if it's going to be this year, but we're not close to bowl contention at this point. It's for Mississippi State, at least. It's not. If we can get 5 wins, that's something.
Oh, if they could get, isn't there over under 2? Is that what it is in Vegas? Is it 2 wins? Oh, it's 3.5. Sorry, it's 3.5.
Okay.
They had 2 last year.
Yeah, I gotta say that might be the worst self-inflicted roster wound by going from Leach to Arnett to Levy.
Yeah.
It's roster whiplash. They got to give this guy a lot of time in that regard.
That's fair. I don't think if you told me right now, I have no idea what the line looks like on either of these games, but I really wouldn't hate the concept of just money lining Southern Miss and Northern Illinois in their games against Mississippi State. But they could be favored.
Southern Miss is 11.5-point underdogs at home against Mississippi State.
Wow.
The Southern, yeah, okay, I'm all over that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, let's bet that.
That seems simple.
Charles Huff's gonna have it all together in game 1, huh?
Hey, he just took his Marshall team down to Mississippi.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why it could be in game 1.
Yeah.
It's really just Mississippi State versus Marshall. They just write it as Southern Miss in this calendar.
Yeah, you're telling me I can get 11.5 for Mississippi State versus the MAC, or not the MAC, the Conference USA champs.
The Sun Belt champs.
Or Sun Belt champs.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, they keep moving leagues. Yeah, I'll do that every day.
Yep. Okay. Cool. We're going to wrap up with a couple questions. You might have foreshadowed a couple here already, Graham. I'll let you go first. One upset involving an SEC team. It can be in conference, out of conference.
Oh, man. You guys go ahead. Hold on. I wasn't prepared for that. I want to give you something better than Mississippi State Southern Miss. It's not super entertaining.
That's brilliant. That's right in our wheelhouse on this pod.
Okay.
That's as good as it gets.
Well, I'll give you that one. I think Oklahoma gets Texas. I do. I feel that one in the stars a little bit.
Wow. I'm going to go next, and I'm going to follow the same theme. And we hit on this, and we talked about both teams. I'm going with A&M over the Longhorns.
I was about to do that one.
I beat you to it.
Yeah, you did. Sucks being last. Okay. Man, we're really beating up on Texas. Florida over Tennessee wouldn't be an upset, right? That's too...
No,
I don't think so,
they'll be
right?
favored
That's
in
close.
that game.
Probably,
With
yeah.
Aguilar.
Yeah. Give me... Okay.
Phil still has Florida ahead.
Yeah. Let's do South Carolina versus someone. I'm not sure. What would be... It's so hard to pick their lines, right? Are they an underdog at LSU? If so, then yeah, we'll take that one. Are they... No, let's see. Do they play... Yeah. Give me South Carolina upsets Alabama at home.
Wow. Okay.
I also Tulane on the road at Ole Miss. I think that's not a bad spot to take a flyer.
Yeah. I'm just the Tulane quarterback position is the big question mark for me. I literally don't know.
You don't like Retzloff?
I don't know. I just spent a whole 20 minutes talking about spring practice and the importance of it. We'll see. I like him. I think by conference time it'll be better. It's just that's a bit of an ask. All right. Who plays for the conference title? Robert, you go first this time.
I don't know. Give me...
It's the SEC. I could ask anybody on the street and they would have an opinion. Come on.
Yeah,
I know.
No, I mean, it's... A part of me wants to just do a weird one. Like, something just out of left field. Give me Texas A&M and...
Wow. My goodness.
See, that's the thing, right? It's like we're starting weird here. We're not... like...
Oh, my goodness.
Texas A&M and... Give me South Carolina. I'm probably going to agree with
My
that.
goodness.
But
okay, parlay that. Just you have to.
I really
just
should
$1.
parlay that. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna go a lot more chalkier than that. I'm gonna go Georgia and Bama. So I'm a little bit outrageous that I'm tossing Texas. The guest wraps it up here.
I'm going to go Georgia and Bama as well, unfortunately. I'm sorry. But, yeah.
You can apologize. Come on.
Yeah,
okay. You came through with Southern Miss over Mississippi State. That's so on brand for this podcast.
I like it. Yeah. I could see – I like your A&M pick, though, Robert. I do. I thought about it. Like, I don't think A&M or Oklahoma's out of the – I could see things just working well for them because they avoid Georgia and Bama.
Well, A&M is 14-1 to win the conference. If again, like their schedule is pretty easy, right? That seems kind of like you can easily like even just for closing, like if they beat Notre Dame and they beat Auburn, if they're closing in on the season like they were last year, undefeated, right? And they lose against Texas or South Carolina, right? Like at whatever X1, they make the playoff. Like the thing, and there's no way that the money line is going to be more than 14-1 against Texas or South Carolina or even Alabama or Georgia. They're not going to be 20-1 underdogs against Bama or Georgia in the championship game. So,
no doubt,
that might be a bet. There is A&M to make the playoff.
I think
they're. Yeah, that's a good point too. Because again, that's the same thing, right? Okay, yeah. If they make the championship game, yeah, okay, you're happy. They make the championship game, you're like, cool, I'm happy because they'll make the playoffs. Now you're only cashing a plus 225, not a 14-1. But yeah, let's see, they are to make the playoffs. They are what 225 plus 225.
Cool. All right, Graham, thank you so much for taking all this time. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely, guys, for having me. It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it.
You brought some excellent material. Did not disappoint. Robert, you and I will do better next time to match the effort of our guest. Thank you for sticking with us this long, everybody. We will see you. That's the last preview. We will see you basically on the premiere of Island Time. Until then, bye. Thank you all.
See ya.